Chapter 896. Lin Xiao let out a sigh of relief and helplessly found that this trick really didn't work. After the energy core couldn't be used, her control over the power of space also became smaller. She couldn't suppress Wu Qingyue at all. Because of Wu Qingyue's rampage, Lu Tianyi and the other zombies on this side of the lake were stiff and didn't dare to move, while the mutant sheep and roe deer on the other side of the lake were all on the ground with their heads buried. Speaking of this group of roe deer and mutant sheep, in addition to the ones they originally caught, there were also some young ones. Rumble Dash, although there were no black clouds in the sky, Wu Qingyue could still strike down a few lightning strikes from the sky to hit the trees. Bang 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 dash, the lightning struck the tree trunks in Lin Xiao's space, creating a burst of sparks. But these trees couldn't be damaged in the slightest. The degree of hardness could be imagined. Looking at Wu Qingyue's violent energy, Lin Xiao could only take him out of the space. Since her space couldn't suppress him, there was no need to stay inside. After coming out, Wu Qingyue was still holding Lin Xiao tightly, one hand holding her hand, the other hand around her waist. After a while, when he felt that there were no threats around, he slightly raised his head to look around. His nose was filled with the fragrance he liked, so he didn't continue to go crazy. Lin Xiao stood motionless, her clothes were still wet, but being held like this, she could feel the other's body temperature. Fortunately, it wasn't very hot, and it was raining, her body was wet and cold, so Lin Xiao didn't feel uncomfortable. Since she couldn't enter the space, and couldn't go back to the base, she could only find a house to hide from the rain. But this was the suburbs, a few kilometers away from the city area. With Wu Qingyue's current situation, she couldn't bring other people out to be drivers for her. She didn't know if Wu Qingyue cared, but even if he didn't care, the zombies in her space weren't high level. If they came out, they would probably be scared by Wu Qingyue's energy pressure and wouldn't dare to move. Then she could only go back. But now she had to wait for this madman to calm down first. Rumble Dash. A few more lightning struck less than 5 meters around the two of them, and grass flew everywhere. With his body restrained, Lin Xiao could only silently look up at the sky. Numerous lightning snakes flashed in the clouds, and from time to time, a few would fall. As he watched, he suddenly realized that there were fewer and fewer lightning bolts falling down. Then the lightning snakes in the dark clouds gradually faded away. Lin Xiao immediately reacted. The lightning energy around him had indeed calmed down, and it was slowly shrinking back. At this moment, a few sounds suddenly came from afar. A woo, a woo, a woo. As soon as he heard this strange cry, he knew it was Awang. Since Awang had appeared, it meant that the other two weren't far away. She didn't expect that the three she had left at the outskirts of the base would chase after her. Here comes the real dog nose. Wu Qingyue, who had been gradually calming down, suddenly became alert again when he heard Awang's voice, as though he had sensed that his territory had been invaded. He jerked his head up and stared warily in the direction of Awang's voice. The surrounding air pressure began to rise again. Rumble! The lightning serpents that had just quietly disappeared began to flash out from the dark clouds again. Lin Xiao was speechless as he looked at his instinctive reaction. Perhaps because Wu Qingyue's energy aura was too strong, Awang and the other two didn't dare to come close. They could only appear on a hill beside the highway and howl in Lin Xiao's direction from afar. Whoa, 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 whoa. It's not that we don't want to go over, but we can't. Master, what are you guys playing at? Is it fun? Lin Xiao. It's not fun at all. Wu Qingyue, who had finally calmed down a little, began to rage again. Lin Xiao felt helpless. At this moment, Wu Qingyue suddenly looked around. The highway was too empty, and he didn't feel safe. He had to leave this place and find a safe place. Instinctively, he acted according to the thoughts in his heart. Before Lin Xiao could react, he suddenly flipped her over and carried her up. Her body froze. And before she could react, she suddenly heard the sound of the wind and the feeling of rain on the side of her face. She turned to look and saw that Wu Qingyue had already leaped into the sky with her. He stepped on the street lights and leaped in the direction of the city. Lin Xiao immediately reached out a hand to the back of Wu Qingyue's neck while being carried by him. She was prepared to take advantage of the fact that he was not paying attention while they were rushing. However, just as her hand reached behind him, Wu Qingyue suddenly stopped. He stood on a street light and looked down at her. His face was expressionless, and his eyes were cold. Lin Xiao. She didn't know why she felt a little guilty when he looked at her. What was going on? Why did she feel guilty? She silently retracted her hand. The two of them looked at each other for a few seconds before Wu Qingyue looked away. His legs moved, and he continued to move forward. After a while, houses immediately appeared in the surrounding environment. Wu Qingyue still carried Lin Xiao and leaped onto the roofs of one building after another. He leaped toward the tallest building nearby. Lin Xiao could even feel the three dogs following them from afar. But they were really far away. She seemed to have smelled the scent of Xiao Liqing and the others from afar, but it was washed clean by the rain. If it wasn't for her nose being more sensitive than a dog's, she probably wouldn't have been able to smell the faint scent. However, Lin Xiao quickly understood that Xiao Liqing and the others were probably here to keep an eye on Wu Qingyue. Even if Wu Qingyue went crazy now, they couldn't just ignore him. After all, he was their leader. Apart from Xiao Liqing, Lin Xiao also smelled Duan Wan and the others in her base. Obviously, they had come together. At this moment, Xiao Liqing was indeed a few kilometers away from Wu Qingyue and Lin Xiao. Did they really go this way? Xiao Liqing asked Duan Wan in the back seat uncertainly. Duan Wan looked at Shen Yuzhen next to her. Shen Yuzhen looked out of the window and nodded. It's in this direction. I can feel the leader's aura. I can also feel Leader Wu's energy fluctuations. Can't you guys feel it? Xiao Liqing thought for a few seconds. Maybe they're too far away. Can you feel how far they are? Shen Yuzhen shook her head. Xiao Liqing looked at Duan Wan again. Does your leader really have a way? What if she can't do it? After all, their leader was too powerful. Although Lu Tianyu was also very strong now. But in Xiao Liqing's eyes, there was still a gap between him and Wu Qingyue. Duan Wan shrugged. If even our leader can't do anything, then we can only wait for your leader to wake up. Anyway, even their leader couldn't do it, let alone the others. Even if they called Sikong Chen over, the effect would probably be worse than their leaders. Chapter 897. When Lin Xiao was placed on the ground, Wu Qingyue had already taken her to a room on the top floor of a tall building. After arriving here, Wu Qingyue did not do anything, but he still held her hand. It seemed that as long as Lin Xiao was by his side, he would always be this quiet. Actually, it was her scent that calmed him down. But Lin Xiao did not know this. News of Wu Qingyue going berserk quickly spread back to Sea City base. But under the orders of Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui, this news was immediately covered up. How could it be now? What should we do now? Who has the ability to wake him up? Xiao Yunlong frowned with a headache and said in a somewhat impatient tone. They clearly knew that China and the other bases were preparing to come over to discuss a deal. But at this time, their strongest expert went crazy. Without Wu Qingyue's deterrence, the other party would obviously make other moves. That was why he couldn't let the other party know about this. Zhou Shihui was also frowning, but he was much calmer than Xiao Yunlong. He thought for a moment before saying, "Doesn't Miss Lu from the Universal Base know how to turn invisible? Moreover, her strength shouldn't be any weaker than ours. If she can't even use invisibility, what else can we do? I don't think we can even get close to Wu Qingyue." Those who were strong and could get close to him. Thinking about it, there was no one more suitable than that woman. Then what should we do? We can only rely on her. If she also can't do it, then are we just going to watch him go crazy? Xiao Yunlong said irritably. Looking at his tone, it was obvious that he felt that the female zombie wouldn't be able to succeed so easily. After all, in his eyes, Wu Qingyue was very strong. Very strong. Zhou Shihui looked at him and said angrily, "Don't be so pessimistic. Maybe Miss Lu can really succeed? Besides, the most important thing now is to keep an eye on this news and not let it leak out. We must keep an eye on this." Xiao Yunlong's expression also grew solemn. The people of Sea City and Universal Life Base placed their hopes on Lin Xiao to wake Wu Qingyue up. However, They did not know that Wu Chengyue was looking for various opportunities to sneak attack Lin Xiao. As a result, every time she was about to make a move, Wu Chengyue would turn his head and stare at her. Lin Xiao had no choice but to silently withdraw his hand. After a few times, she finally understood. Wu Chengyue's senses were very sharp. As long as she had a thought, he would immediately discover it. But he didn't do anything to her every time. He just quietly looked at her with a pair of cold and expressionless beautiful eyes. Therefore, every time Lin Xiao saw his pair of red eyes looking at him, Lin Xiao felt an inexplicable sense of guilt in his heart. It was as if he had done something bad. Duan Wan, Xiao Liqing, and the others hid a few hundred meters away from the building where Lin Xiao and Wu Chengyue were. They carried items that were stained with Lin Xiao's blood, so the surrounding zombies avoided them. They just needed to pay attention to the other mutants. The leader's energy seems to have calmed down again, but it doesn't seem like he's awake. What's going on with him now? Xiao Liqing carefully sensed the auras of the two people on the rooftop in the distance, but he could only sense the calm aura of his leader. His leader's aura had disappeared for a while, but it didn't take long for him to reappear. However, when he reappeared, his aura was very turbulent. After it appeared, it quickly moved towards the city. When they caught up, they found that their leader's aura had calmed down again. Was he awake now? Or was he not awake? No matter what, even if their leader went crazy, he was different from others. Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen both looked at Xiao Liqing with a blank face and shook their heads. When other espers go berserk, their energy will go everywhere, and their abilities will be released randomly. But Wu Chengyue only occasionally dropped a few lightning bolts, and then it kept rumbling in the dark clouds in the sky. What kind of madness was this? Or was he doing something? What happened to the strongest person? Although the energy looked very violent, why didn't it feel so scary? But thinking about it was just thinking about it. The few of them didn't dare to get too close to experience their leader going crazy. The leader is also with Leader Wu. Could it be because of our leader? Xin Yuzhen sniffed in the direction of Lin Xiao and Xiao Liqing, then turned around and said to the two of them. Duan Wan and Xiao Liqing both looked at her. They were only mutants, so their perception wasn't as detailed as Xin Yuzhen's. Hearing her say this, the two of them felt that it was possible. But it had been so long, and Miss Lu still hadn't brought Wu Chengyue back soberly. It seemed that the situation on her side was a bit tricky. On one hand, they wanted to figure out the situation of the two of them, but on the other hand, they didn't dare to rashly approach. Duan Wan and the others were so curious that they felt like they were being scratched by a cat, but they had to suppress their curiosity. At this moment, Shen Yuzhen suddenly turned her head and sniffed in another direction. Her expression darkened, and she looked at Duan Wan and said, "Your pursuers are here." Hearing this, Duan Wan immediately knew who she was referring to. Her expression also darkened, and a sharp light flashed in her eyes. Xiao Liqing looked at the two of them strangely. "Who are they?" Duan Wan glanced at him and sneered. "A few rats, but since they are here, we can't let them escape." Then she turned to look at Xin Yuzhen and said, "Since they dare to follow us here, then let's make sure they don't return. Anyway, if they die outside, it has nothing to do with our base." Xin Yuzhen looked at her. "They have a lot of people, and we don't have enough people here. It will be difficult to kill them all." It was just difficult, but not impossible. Duan Wan smiled, but there was a trace of coldness in her smile. "Didn't you feel it? Look over there." With that, she pointed in another direction. Xin Yuzhen and Xiao Liqing looked in the direction that Duan Wan pointed, but they didn't see anything. However, after sensing carefully, they found that there were a few subtle auras that were somewhat familiar. "This is Hme, Awang and the other two?" Xin Yuzhen immediately found out the identity of the other party. With a smile in her eyes, Duan Wan nodded. Their leader's 3 pets were no longer a secret in the eyes of everyone present. Xin Yuzhen said hesitantly, "But they only listened to the leader. Can they cooperate with us?" Xiao Liqing didn't have any objections to their conversation. They wanted to kill the group of unknown people who had secretly followed them here. Of course, he wanted to do so too, because too many people couldn't know that their leader had gone crazy. Although Yuan Tianqing and Lin Feng had suppressed the people in the base, It was uncertain about the situation outside. Seeing Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen's attitude, Xiao Liqing knew that he was on their side. Chapter 898. We don't need them to be obedient and cooperate with us. We just need to cooperate with them. Look at this. Duan Wan smiled as she took out the item stained with Lin Xiao's blood aura and shook it. Lure them over. Xin Yuzhen's eyes lit up. You mean, she understood. She meant to lure them over and invade the territory of the three pets. They had Lin Xiao's aura, so they would be fine. But those who followed them might not have Lin Xiao's aura. We just need to be careful not to let anyone escape. Duan Wan smiled meaningfully and stood up. Let's go. As she spoke, she glanced at Xiao Liqing. Xiao Liqing nodded. They quickly moved and left with their subordinates. Lu Wan, along with 2 rank 5 ability users, and a dozen rank 2 and 3 ability users, followed Duan Wan's group from a distance. Using his binoculars, he watched as Duan Wan's group suddenly left and drove off in the direction of the thunderclouds. He had just come out of the medical center when he heard someone say that the leader of Ocean City had gone crazy. The female leader of Universal Base wanted to stop him. Since the 2 leaders had left the base, their subordinates would definitely follow. When he heard that Duan Wan had also left the base, and that there were only 3 people with her, none of whom were very strong. Even if there was a level 6 Arcanist, he could deal with that one. Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen were level 5 and level 4 respectively, so the others could deal with them. Lu Wan obviously didn't care about the other level 2 driver. Lu Wan immediately led his men out of the base. Since Xin Yuzhen and Duan Wan were together, they could capture them together. Since it happened outside the base, as long as they kept it a secret, Xin Yuzhen wouldn't find out. Chase them. Don't let them escape. We must catch them this time. Don't worry about the other 2. Just keep them busy, Lu Wan immediately ordered. Then a group of people quickly left and jumped into the car to chase after them. On the other side, Duan Wan and the others drove to a place not far from where Ah Wang's 3 pets were. They immediately got out of the car and hid in the house to ambush them. They were waiting for Lu Wan and the others to come. Ah Wang and the others sensed the arrival of Duan Wan and the others, because they smelled Lin Xiao's aura on them. Ah Wang and the others did not care much and directly ignored them. But not long after, another group of unfamiliar auras appeared. This group of humans did not have Lin Xiao's aura, which immediately made Ah Wang and Dahe vigilant. Ah Wang stood up from the corner of a building's roof. He pricked up his ears and raised his head to take a sniff. After confirming that this group of people did not have Lin Xiao's aura, it began to squint its eyes and bare its teeth. Roar! A low roar came from Ah Wang's throat. Hearing its voice, the mushroom spirit hiding in the stairwell and Dahe, who was coiled on the stairwell roof, immediately poked its head out. In fact, Dahe was so big that it covered the entire roof of the stairwell. Big and eye-catching, the aura of a level 6 mutant beast and a level 6 zombie beast were enough to deter other intruders. Their auras had already temporarily marked out the territory in this area. However, at this time, 2 groups of people came. One group had the aura of their master, and the other didn't. Therefore, based on their animal instincts, they immediately rejected the group of people that did not have Lin Xiao's aura. Dahe slid down from the roof and landed on the platform. Then, it stretched its head out and leaned against the railing at the edge of the roof. Its snake eyes revealed a hint of laziness as it looked in the direction of Ah Wang's warning. The mushroom spirit was relatively timid, so it was only willing to hide in the stairwell and poke its head out. Ah Wang's voice was very low, so other than the 2 beside it, no one else could hear it. However, Duan Wan and the others could clearly feel that Ah Wang's aura had become vigilant, and it carried a sense of danger. Wait a minute, Brother Wan. Why do I feel that there is something dangerous around those people? One of the 2 level 5 paranormals, sitting behind Lu Wan, suddenly said with a frown. As human paranormals, their perception was not as strong as that of beasts. However, the one who spoke was a psychic paranormal, so his perception was stronger than that of ordinary paranormals. What did you feel? Lu Wan, who was sitting in the passenger seat, turned to look at him and asked. If it had been someone else who said this, he would not have taken it to heart. However, Since the psychic paranormal had said it, he had no choice but to be vigilant. The psychic paranormal frowned and carefully tried to sense again. But this time, he could not feel anything. He said with some uncertainty, "For a moment, I felt that something dangerous was staring at us, but now I don't feel anything." The other level 5 paranormal looked at him and said, "Could it be that you were thinking too much just now?" As for Ah Wang, he had already retracted his aura and began to hide. Even Dahe's aura was concealed. The two of them had tacitly entered hunter mode. Although the aura of their bodies had disappeared, their eyes were cold and filled with killing intent. It was the state of a predator in the forest when it was about to hunt. Ah Wang's figure flickered as he leaped down from the roof of the 10-story building. He hid himself in another direction, circled around Duan Wan and the others, and leaped toward the back of Lu Wan's group. Dahe stayed in place and sensed Ah Wang's aura. After moving, it had clearly sensed Ah Wang's thoughts. It immediately dove in front of Duan Wan and the others and observed them in the dark. Only Mushroom Spirit was left on the top of the building. Seeing that its two companions had gone down, it immediately jumped out and looked left and right. After sensing the hunting aura of its two companions, it also wanted to go hunting. Seeing that Ah Wang and Dahe were rushing toward the group of people behind them, Mushroom Spirit naturally wanted to go after them. This was because the people in front had the aura of its master. So Mushroom Spirit flew down from the building like the wind and chased after Ah Wang at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. Although Duan Wan and the others could not sense the aura of the three pets, Shen Yuzhen could use her nose to smell any changes in the position of the zombie dogs. "They are attacking." Shen Yuzhen's eyes flashed with joy. Although Duan Wan's words sounded very reliable, when they actually took action, they realized that the three pets were just as they thought they were. They immediately felt as if they had won the lottery. "Let's go. We can't let those rats escape." Duan Wan's eyes turned cold, and she immediately retracted her aura and flashed out. Xiao Liqing and Shen Yuzhen also flashed out, leaving only the level 2 driver behind. Chapter 899. On the roof, Lin Xiao stood in the room, with Wu Qinghua holding her hand. She did nothing but stand there. This building was an office building, but the room Wu Qinghua found was a lounge next to the office of a senior manager of a company before Doomsday. One side of the wall of the lounge was made of glass. People outside couldn't see inside, but people inside could see outside. There was a glass window next to it. Lin Xiao looked at Wu Qinghua, who had calmed down and didn't respond like a robot. She slowly walked to the window. Wu Qinghua followed her. Wu Qinghua didn't restrict her freedom in the room. He just held her hand and didn't let go. Like Siamese twins, he followed Lin Xiao wherever she went. Lin Xiao looked at her hand that he didn't let go and sighed. She couldn't beat him from the front, and had no chance to attack him from behind. She had to find another way to subdue him. She remembered that Lin Hao had said that her lake water could also work. Since she couldn't knock him out, she would let him drink a cup of lake water. Walking to the window, Lin Xiao immediately smelled the breath of two groups of people in the air outside. One was Duan Wan, Xiao Liqing, and the other was the people in the base who were courting death. Lin Xiao felt that Ah Wang and the other two were quietly surrounding the group of people who were courting death. She was stunned for a moment and then felt relieved. Well, since these people dared to chase after them, they must be coming for Duan Wan and Shen Yuzhen. But since they were here, they wouldn't go back. If they were just making trouble in the base, she would deal with them slowly. She didn't expect that they would run out of the base to court death. Then she would help them. Lin Xiao suddenly roared loudly at the window. Roar! 500 or 600 meters away from Lin Xiao, Ah Wang and Dahe, who were quietly surrounding Lu Wan and the others, suddenly stopped and their eyes changed. An ice-cold killing intent flashed through the aura of the three beasts before disappearing without a trace. Lin Xiao's order was to kill all of them. Shen Yuzhen, who was beside Duan Wan, also heard Lin Xiao's voice. Her eyes lit up and she whispered to Duan Wan. The leader found them and ordered Ah Wang and the others to kill them. It seems that they can't escape this time. Duan Wan nodded. He continued to sneak toward Lu Wan and the others. Lu Wan, who didn't know that Ah Wang had already circled to the back, heard the roar, and his expression changed. The one with the most unsightly expression was the spiritual type ability user. The blood drained from his face as a look of horror appeared in his eyes. It's complete. There was a zombie king nearby. That was an order from the zombie king. Lu Wan's expression also changed, and he immediately turned to look out the window. Sure enough, the zombies outside began to gather at their location. Roar, roar. Hee hee. There weren't many zombies in the surroundings, and Lu Wan's group had killed a lot of them. But the smell of living people on their bodies still attracted the surrounding zombies. However, this huge crisis made Lu Wan realize that it wasn't just the zombies nearby that had gathered here. Even those who were far away would gather here. Bang 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 dash. In the car behind Lu Wan's car, several guns extended out of the window and shot at the zombies around them. A zombie's head hung crookedly on its neck. Its facial features were distorted, its eyes were black, and it was baring its teeth. It tilted its head, swung its legs, and stretched out its arms as it ran over. Bang dash, a bullet hit its body, but it only stopped its advance for half a second, and it continued to rush forward. Roar dash, bang dash, if the bullet didn't hit its head, zombies wouldn't die. So when the shooter saw that he didn't hit its head, he immediately shot at its crooked head. At this time, the zombie's head suddenly swung to the side, tilting to the other side. It moved so fast that it dodged the second bullet. Moreover, its running speed was very fast. This was a zombie that had evolved to level 1. This zombie had been staring at this group of people before, but because Lin Xiao, a Wang, and the other high-level zombies were suppressing it, it didn't dare to appear. Now the zombie king had given the order. It could rush out unscrupulously to hunt for food. After dodging the 2 shots, the crooked-head zombie suddenly arched its body and jumped up with both of its legs. It pounced on the second car that Lu Wan and the others were in. Seeing that the zombie was about to pounce on them, their bullets were useless. One of the 4 humanoids on the roof of the car waved his hand, and a small pile of icicles flew toward the zombie. Puff puff dash. The hard icicles hit the zombie's body, and one of them happened to hit its eye and penetrated the back of its head. Putong! The zombie fell from the sky. From the moment the zombie appeared to the moment it was killed, only a few seconds had passed. Everyone in the car was on high alert, and they couldn't wait to look in all directions. They were afraid that a zombie would suddenly appear and bite them to death if they were careless. But this time, Lu Wan had brought elites with him. They had rich combat experience, and they were all psychics. They also brought a lot of weapons, and they were very experienced in dealing with zombies. Their main purpose this time was to catch someone, but they didn't expect to be surrounded by zombies before they could even get close. Generally, when they encountered a large number of zombies, they would quickly find a high point to kill some of the zombies, or find a well-protected room to hide. But at this time, the zombies around them seemed to have gone crazy, and there were more and more. There was a large group of zombies chasing behind them, and there were also a bunch of zombies jumping out from the front and the side. And the movement here would definitely attract the attention of Duan Wan and the others. Tell them not to shoot. Use your ability. Hurry up and rush to where Duan Wan and the others are, and lead the zombies there. Lu Wan looked back, and his face was a bit ugly. The level 5 psychic behind him held a walkie-talkie and said to the car a few meters behind them, "Don't shoot. Use your ability to fight." Behind him, the sound of gunfire had already stopped. Only the sound of abilities exploding and the roars of zombies could be heard. At this time, he looked straight ahead, and from time to time, he would raise a wall to block the zombies on both sides. Suddenly, something flashed before his eyes. Bang! Lu Wan felt something hit the roof of the car. A whoa! A strange yet ear-piercing roar of a beast rang out. Lu Wan and the others felt a chill run down their spines, as if they had fallen into an icy cavern. At the same time, they realized that this was the cry of a zombie beast. On the other hand, there was no one on the roof of Lu Wan's car. The people on the roof of the car behind turned their heads and saw a huge mutant beast standing on top of their boss's car. However, the mutant beast noticed the zombie-like roar. Chapter 900. Everyone in the car behind was stunned when they saw the huge wolfhound, which was unknown whether it was a mutated beast or a zombie, land on the car in front of them. However, in the outside world, a moment of relaxation was fatal. Just as they were in a daze, a figure suddenly appeared beside them and pounced on the people on the roof of the car at lightning speed. It was too late for them to react. In the blink of an eye, a level 3 zombie had already rushed in front of them. Ah, bang! The person who was pounced on screamed and fell on the roof of the car. The other 3 instinctively jumped down from the roof of the car. In the end, they were greeted by a group of zombies rushing towards them. Ho! Roar! At this time, A Wang had already lowered his body and was looking at the windshield of Lu Wan and the others. It even raised one of its front paws and slammed it on the glass. Bang ji! The entire windshield in front of him was smashed. The driver slammed on the brakes, and the car tilted, almost crashing into the electric pole next to it. While Lu Wan's situation was extremely dangerous, Duan Wan and the others found a high vantage point to watch the show through binoculars. On the other side, Lin Xiao shouted an order and took out a glass of water from the space. She held the glass and looked up at Wu Qingyue's face. After thinking for a while, she slowly raised the glass to his handsome lips and gently touched his lips. However, Wu Qingyue only slightly shifted his indifferent gaze and stared at the water in the cup beside his lips. Maybe it was because the cup was a little close to his face, but his eyes were almost crossed. In the end, Wu Qingyue only glanced at it and moved his face back, avoiding the cup. Seeing his reaction, Lin Xiao's face fell. Alright, he wasn't interested in the lake's energy. What should he do now? Force it down? Lin Xiao thought about it and tried to extend the cup over again. However, she saw Wu Qingyue's face turn to the side, and he avoided it again. Here comes the problem again. She was holding the cup in one hand, and her other hand was held tightly. How was she supposed to convince this man? After trying a few times, Wu Qingyue's aura suddenly fluctuated and rose sharply. He abruptly raised his other free hand and slapped away the cup that Lin Xiao extended in front of him. Yes, Lin Xiao reacted quickly and dodged the hand that was coming at him in time. When Wu Qingyue saw that he did not knock the cup out of Lin Xiao's hand, the energy in his body began to rise again. His eyes were fixed on the cup in her hand. Xiao Lin. She silently turned her face side and drank the water into her mouth. Then he put away the cup. Wu Qingyue looked at the way she raised her head to drink the water, and then stared at her moving throat. The aura around him suddenly dropped. After Lin Xiao finished drinking the water, he stared straight at Lin Xiao's moist lips. His eyes suddenly flashed, and the color of his eyes darkened. Lin Xiao suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of danger from Wu Qingyue. She quickly turned her head and looked at him vigilantly. She then realized that Wu Qingyue was staring at her lips without blinking. Lin Xiao's scalp went numb and his eyes darkened. Sigh. Could it be that he wanted to kiss her? As soon as this thought appeared, Wu Qingyue's face suddenly pressed down on her. Lin Xiao quickly moved her neck back and immediately turned her face away to avoid Wu Qingyue's lips. Her other hand quickly lifted up to hold Wu Qingyue's chin, and her own chin was instantly pinched. Shit! He had already lost his mind, and he still wanted to take advantage of her. Lin Xiao wanted to throw Wu Qingyue on the plains to be trampled by a group of mutant beasts. Although she reacted quickly and turned her face away, she used her hand to hold Wu Qingyue's face. But her strength at this time was somewhat unable to compete with Wu Qingyue's strength. Lin Xiao felt her chin being pulled back by a strong force, and her hand that was holding Wu Qingyue's face was slowly pressed down. Lin Xiao, who had cursed 100 times in her heart, was speechless. She was now a level 7 zombie. Her strength could be said to be several times stronger than her, okay? But why was Wu Qingyue's strength stronger than hers? Was he still human? But then she thought about how other psychics could blow a few holes in the iron wall of the isolation room when they went crazy. Thinking about it, when they went crazy, their strength would also be abnormal. With the tip of her chin being pulled away, Lin Xiao could only retreat. However, her back was quickly pressed against the wall around the small window, and she had nowhere to retreat. At this time, Wu Qingyue's lips also pressed down. This was not just a gentle touch, because Wu Qingyue directly opened his mouth and bit Lin Xiao's moist lips. Lin Xiao, who was bitten. Shit, she was a zombie, okay? Why did she feel a tingling sensation coming from her lips? In fact, the pain from her lips was not very serious. But after this kind of tingling sensation, there was a strange numbing sensation spreading on her lips. But at this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly had a flash of inspiration. That's right. Since he wouldn't drink from a cup, then she would feed him with her mouth. As long as he drank the lake water, there was no need to worry about anything else. Anyway, she had done more intimate things with him. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao suddenly turned her face away. The hand that was originally pressing against Wu Qingyue's neck loosened, and a cup of water immediately appeared in her hand. She quickly poured it into her mouth. Then, she quickly turned her head back and took the initiative to kiss Wu Qingyue's lips. The sweet and soft taste in his mouth suddenly disappeared. Wu Qingyue was stunned, and a wave of madness immediately appeared in his heart. However, before he could do anything, Lin Xiao kissed him again. Her soft and fragrant tongue came over and quickly pushed Wu Qingyue's teeth open. Then she passed all the lake water in her mouth over. Wu Qingyue, who was originally sucking the liquid from Lin Xiao's mouth, swallowed the water that Lin Xiao passed over. Then his tongue also entered Lin Xiao's mouth, as if he was catching prey, tangling with her soft tongue for a while. The hand that was holding onto her chin slowly loosened, and he instinctively hugged Lin Xiao's body tightly in his arms. The hand that had been holding onto Lin Xiao, without letting go, also loosened at this time. Both of his hands were tightly wrapped around Lin Xiao's waist, and he strangled her to his body. After Lin Xiao finished the water, she wanted to step back and drink another mouthful. However, this person refused to let her step back. He tyrannically wrapped his tongue around hers and vigorously sucked on her lips. Because she didn't need to breathe, Lin Xiao didn't feel dizzy or weak all over. It was just that the feeling on her lips was still very sensitive, and the numbing sensation spread from her lips to the sensory organs in her mouth and tongue. However, she had only crossed a mouthful of lake water, and it was far from enough to resolve Wu Qingyue's madness. So when Lin Xiao thought about how she had to cross a few more mouthfuls, her heart felt stifled. Chapter 901. Struggling to save his tongue, Lin Xiao quickly turned his face away and gulped down a mouthful of water. Then she turned her head and kissed Wu Qingyue again. When Wu Qingyue kissed her, the energy in his body would fade away. Every time she struggled to break away from his kiss, his energy would immediately go berserk until Lin Xiao kissed him again. After going back and forth 5 times, Lin Xiao felt that her tongue and lips were numb and had no feeling. The strength of Wu Qingyue's kiss also gradually decreased. Then he slightly narrowed his eyes. Then he closed his eyes, and his body suddenly went limp and fell onto Lin Xiao's body. Lin Xiao subconsciously caught him, but when she realized what she had done, she didn't want to push him away. Plop! She threw Wu Qingyue to the ground, and finally turned her head to look out of the window with a sigh of relief. She immediately smelled the scent of blood from afar. At this time, Lu Wan and the others were already covered in blood, and they looked for a place to hide in panic. The number of people had also decreased a lot. Originally there were more than 10 people in the 2 cars, but now there were only 5 or 6 people squeezed together. They hid in a bank security room. The door of the security room was made of a thick special alloy material. It was sturdy and hard, so it would be very safe to hide here. But the ventilation system in the room was no longer working, so they couldn't stay for too long. Lu Wan's body was now covered in bright red blood, but it wasn't his. He pulled one of his subordinates over to block the blood from his claws. At that time, the level 6 zombie dog rushed over like the wind, and when it was about to pounce on him with its sharp claws, Lu Wan couldn't dodge in time, and only had time to pull one of his subordinates over to protect him. That huge black-furred dog had a pair of pitch-black eyes that flashed with red light. But its body didn't have any wounds like the other zombie beasts. Its whole body was covered with a layer of smooth black fur, very clean. But it couldn't hide the giant dog's zombie-like eyes. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of something hitting came from outside the door. There was also the sound of sharp claws scratching the metal, For the time being, no matter if it was a zombie dog or a zombie, they couldn't come in. Only then did the people in the room let out a sigh of relief. Is anyone hurt? Lu Wan turned his head and looked at the others present. Everyone shook their heads solemnly. Lu Wan sized up everyone with a sharp gaze, and only relaxed when he saw that no one was avoiding his gaze. At this time, if he was injured by zombies, then Lu Wan could only send him a bullet. This was a secret room, and he did not want to wait for someone to suddenly turn into a zombie. Now that they were hiding here, they couldn't go out for the time being. They could only wait until the zombies outside could no longer smell them, and then they would retreat by themselves. Only then could they leave this place again. Bang, bang, bang. The knocking sounds from outside the door did not stop. When Lu Wan turned his head, he did not see the level 5 psychic ability user. His face paled, but he quickly lowered his head to hide it. His drooping eyes were filled with despair at this time, and he tightly covered his other arm with one hand. Black blood oozed out from the gaps between his fingers. The antidote for the virus had not been researched yet, so if he left the base and was infected by the virus, he would only die. Generally, if he was injured and did not turn into a zombie, he would send himself a bullet to prevent himself from turning into a zombie and then being killed by others. But at this time, the psychic ability user did not want to die, he still wanted to live. Everyone's time of infection was different. He wanted to live one day at a time, maybe tomorrow or the day after someone would research the antidote. With this kind of extravagant thought, the psychic ability user decided to hide it for now. But thinking about their current situation, he felt despair again. Let's not talk about whether they could get out of here. Even if they could get out, he may not have the strength to kill zombies and protect himself. At this time, the knocking sounds outside the door suddenly disappeared. Lu Wan immediately leaned against the door and listened to the movements outside. He found that it was suddenly quiet. Generally, this kind of situation would make people feel dangerous, and Lu Wan was no exception. After listening for a while, he found that there was really no sound outside. He frowned, and then vigilantly retreated. He looked up left and right and carefully observed. Seeing his reaction, the others also paid attention to the surroundings. What's wrong? Lu Wan did not say anything. He just made a shoe gesture to the others. After listening quietly for more than 10 minutes, there was still no change. But Lu Wan did not relax. At this time, somewhere outside the safety room, a Wang was waving its 2 claws and vigorously digging a hole. Something had smashed a hole in this spot earlier, and the cement tiles on the surface had cracked. That was why it was convenient for A Wang to dig there. A Wang's claws were like steel, its 2 front claws rapidly digging nonstop. The mushroom spirit at the side looked at it curiously. The dangling tentacles curled up and down. The umbrella head swayed left and right, looking very novel. Duan Wan and the others stood outside the bank, feeling refreshed and carefree. They should be hiding in the safety room. That's the only place that's safer. But there is no electricity here. The ventilation equipment is off. There's not much air in the safety room. Duan Wan said with both hands in the pockets of her military trousers, looking in the direction of the bank. The few of them just stood there boldly. Although the surrounding zombies were tempted by the smell of the living, they did not dare to approach due to the pressure of Lin Xiao's blood qi. So there were no zombies around them. They overestimate themselves. If it wasn't for the fact that the leader has been so busy recently, he would have given the order to deal with them. Deputy Leader Yuan is still not decisive enough. Shen Yuzhen snorted in disdain, then sighed when she mentioned Yuan Tianxing. This time, they came looking for death. There are still some people to deal with when we go back. Duan Wan smiled. Xiao Liqing turned his head worriedly to look in the direction of his leader. He felt the leader's ability fluctuate, disappearing for a moment, and then becoming irritable the next. He did not know what she was doing, and it must be the female zombie leader. Would she take the opportunity to bully his leader? After all, the atmosphere between the two of them was not very good. At this time, Lin Xiao, who was suspected of bullying Wu Qingyue, turned his head to look at Wu Qingyue, who was lying on the ground without a care for his image. He thought about the interaction between the two just now and muttered in his heart. Wake up and don't know about this. Wake up and don't know about this. Wake up and don't know about this. If he knew that the two of them kissed for almost an hour, and that she took the initiative to go over, he did not know what this person was going to do. Chapter 902. It turned out that psychics who went berserk didn't remember what happened when they went berserk. Lin Xiao stood on the side with her arms crossed, waiting for Wu Qingyue to wake up. After Wu Qingyue fell, he woke up in less than a minute. He opened his eyes and found himself lying on the ground. He immediately saw the dust on the ground. After blinking for a few seconds, Wu Qingyue slowly propped himself up from the ground. He covered his forehead and just stood up. He saw Lin Xiao leaning against the wall with an expressionless face. Where is this? He looked at the unfamiliar surroundings and the dust on the ground. Wu Qingyue hesitantly looked at Lin Xiao and asked. His clothes were wet. Then he looked at the female zombie's clothes, they were also wet. He looked out the window next to the female zombie. It was dark outside, it should be raining. But why were they here? Wu Qingyue walked to the window and looked outside. It was still unfamiliar. He turned around and looked at Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao raised her eyebrows. Don't you remember that you went berserk? It took me a lot of effort to wake you up. Her lips were almost swollen, okay? At this moment, her pale lips were a little purple because the blood in her body was now dark red. After being ravaged by Wu Qingyue, although her lips weren't swollen, the color had darkened. What happened to your lips? Wu Qingyue suddenly looked at her lips strangely and asked. Lin Xiao. She didn't want to talk to him. Wu Qingyue looked at her curiously, looking at her current appearance. Her long hair was originally tied up behind her head. It was dripping wet. Her face was still pale, but there was a layer of luster. Her green eyes flashed with a cold light. The purplish-red lips under her nose made her face even paler. A strand of wet hair hung down from her forehead and stuck to the side of her face. Her pursed purple lips, coupled with her own sharp aura, caused her entire person to exude a cold and elegant temperament. There was an inexplicable temptation in Wu Qingyue's eyes. Lin Xiao calmed herself down and looked at him calmly. It's nothing. Since you're awake, go back. Your energy made Lingling faint. It's a good thing that you instinctively know to protect her. As for Wu Qingyue's question, Lin Xiao could only use Lingling to divert his attention. Sure enough, as soon as he heard about Lingling's situation, Wu Qingyue became nervous. What? Lingling fainted because of me? How is she? Are you hurt? Looking at Wu Qingyue, who was nervously staring at him, Lin Xiao saw a trace of fear and dread in his heart. He was afraid that he would say something that would hurt Lingling. At that time, I only had a cursory look and didn't find any other problems. We'll only know the actual situation after we return, Lin Xiao said. Wu Qingyue's eyes flashed with deep worry, but he suppressed it. He raised his head to look at Lin Xiao. What about you? How did you suppress me? He knew his own strength, let alone when he went berserk. But now that he was awake, there was only him and this female zombie here. She had also said that she had helped him to wake up. Wu Qingyue really wanted to know what had happened during this process. Looking at the surroundings, there were no signs of a fight, which meant that he was not in a berserk state when they were here. Then she must have knocked him down somewhere else and brought him here. Hearing Wu Qingyue's words, Lin Xiao's mouth twitched. She suppressed her facial features that were about to twist. She said expressionlessly, "That's not important. What's important is that you are awake now. Don't talk so much nonsense, let's go. I still have something to take care of here." Those people hadn't all died yet, so she was going to clean up the mess. Wu Qingyue looked at her in silence. Her clothes were still wet. Why didn't she change? Even if she didn't change, why couldn't she use her superpower to steam it? It was definitely uncomfortable to wear like this. Sure enough, there was a problem with her body. And it wasn't a small problem. Fortunately, Lin Xiao was still wearing a two-piece suit, a skirt and a suit jacket. But because her clothes were wet, it was inevitable that they would stick to her body. So her slightly bulging belly was invisible under Wu Qingyue's deliberate gaze. At this time, Wu Qingyue had already dried his clothes. Seeing Lin Xiao turn around, he suddenly reached out to pull her. What are you doing? Lin Xiao was pulled back, but she wasn't as repulsed as before. She subconsciously waved her hand away. Maybe it was because her hand had been firmly held by this man not long ago, so she was a little used to it. Without waiting for her to finish, a scorching energy pounced on her body, evaporating all the water in her clothes and hair. Before Lin Xiao could shake off her hand, Wu Qingyue automatically let go. Lin Xiao looked down at her clothes, and her expression suddenly became a little ugly. Without saying anything, she turned and walked straight to the door. There was nothing she could do. She found out. Seeing Lin Xiao walk out without any hesitation, Wu Qingyue suddenly raised his hand and looked at it. He didn't know why, but after holding her hand just now, he had a familiar feeling. When he looked up again, Lin Xiao was already gone. Wu Qingyue immediately rubbed his head, and the bangs in front of his forehead were all pulled to the top of his head, revealing his clean forehead. Because of the temporary change in hairstyle, his temperament also became a little fierce. He stood silently for a few seconds, looked at the door Lin Xiao left, and his eyes deepened. He lifted his legs and walked out. This female zombie's feeling of repulsion towards him became a little subtle. Her attitude didn't seem to be as strong as before, but she still maintained a distance. But there seemed to be something else in the middle of this distance. During the time he lost his mind, she must have done something to him, or he must have done something to her, causing the atmosphere between the two of them to become a little subtle. Wu Qingyue's mouth curved into a meaningful smile. It seemed that he had to find a way to figure out what happened between the two of them. And her body. Thinking of this, Wu Qingyue's mouth relaxed again. He also strode out. Lin Xiao found a staircase and climbed directly to the roof. Then she stood on the roof and looked around. At this time, the rain outside had stopped, but the sky was still gray. A gust of wet wind blew over her body, lifting her long hair and skirt. When Wu Qingyue came up, he saw her directly jump down from the building. Then he appeared on the roof of a slightly lower building, heading towards the aura of Xiao Liqing and Duan Wan. His figure flashed, and he also disappeared from the roof. He appeared in front of Duan Wan, and the others one step ahead of Lin Xiao. Looking at the big snake on the roof of the bank, Wu Qingyue asked them curiously, "What's the situation here?" As soon as Xiao Liqing saw him, he shouted happily, "Leader, you're awake!" Chapter 903. Who's inside? Wu Qingyue stood under the roof and looked at the bank across from him. Xiao Liqing said, "Oh, it's the group of people who came last time. The ones who wanted to cause trouble." Wu Qingyue's eyes turned cold, and a murderous intent flashed past. "Are you talking about those people who wanted to use their beauty to seduce her?" Of course, it wasn't just the people in the base who knew about it. Even Wu Qingyue knew about it. If he didn't know about it, everyone in the base knew about it and was on guard. As an outsider, if it wasn't convenient for him to interfere, he would have done it already. He was planning to add fuel to the fire when the female zombie made a move on them. Those who dared to covet him were asking for death. "How many people are left? How strong are they?" Wu Qingyue asked. 6, 1 level 6 earth element, 2 level 5 ones, 1 spirit and 1 fire element. There are 2 level 3 and 1 level 2. But I don't think we need to do anything. We just need to make sure no one escapes. At this moment, Duan Wan spoke up for Xiao Liqing. After saying that, he glanced at the giant snake that was slithering on the roof of the bank opposite him. Wu Qingyue had already seen the giant snake when he arrived here. Now that he heard Duan Wan's words, he understood what she meant. At this moment, Lin Xiao finally walked over slowly. She looked at the formation in front of her and smelled the scent in the air. Then, she stared at the other side and said, "One of them has been infected. I don't know if Lu Wan knows about this." Then, she turned her head and realized that the atmosphere was a bit weird. Duan Wan, Xiao Liqing, and Shen Yuzhen all stared at Lin Xiao's purplish-red lips. Lin Xiao was stunned and then pursed her lips. "What are you looking at?" The three of them suddenly turned their heads and looked at Wu Qingyue's lips. Lin Xiao. She felt like she was going to be betrayed by her teammates. What should she do? Could she throw them out? But it was too late. Sure enough, when Wu Qingyue saw their reactions, he finally realized what was going on. He turned his head and looked at Lin Xiao's lips carefully, then slowly smiled. The smile in his eyes was so bright that Lin Xiao couldn't bear to look at it. The other three were also stunned by his smile. All of them turned their heads away in unison. No wonder this female zombie had such a strange feeling towards him when he woke up. Was it because he had kissed her? Right, he remembered that he had received information that the potion that this female zombie gave Lingling to suppress her awakening could solve the berserk state of psychics. Because he had just woken up, his IQ wasn't high enough, so he didn't think of this problem. Noticing that Wu Qingyue's gaze had become fiery, Lin Xiao silently raised his eyes to the sky. She saw nothing. She knew nothing. Ahem. Where's Awang? Xiao Lin couldn't help but ask after looking at the sky for 3 seconds. Duan immediately retracted her gaze and looked at her as she replied, "He's inside. I don't know what he's doing, but those guys are hiding in the vault." Lin Xiao narrowed his eyes as he explained the strength of the people inside. He was not in a hurry. He just waited with Duan and the others expressionlessly. It would be even better if a certain someone withdrew that dazzling gaze. Duan and the other two turned their backs to Wu Qingyue. They really couldn't look directly at his rippling aura at this time. Shen Yuzhen was fine. At least she had a husband, so her defense was relatively strong. But the other two single dogs were somewhat abused. After more than half an hour, they suddenly saw people rushing out of the bank with gunshots. Several energy auras also came out in a chaotic manner. It was obvious that a fight had begun. A wood-dash, Awang's barking came from inside. After they rushed out, before they had time to look around, a huge snake head suddenly fell from the sky and bit one of the two level 5 psychics. The level 5 fire psychic didn't have time to react. He let out a scream as he was sucked into the sky. Dahe didn't eat him. It just used its 2 poisonous teeth to penetrate deep into his body and swung him around on the roof. Red blood rained down from the sky, dripping everywhere like a rain of blood. Plop! Soon, that person was spat out by Dahe. He was thrown down like a piece of dead meat. The body on the ground was poisoned to a purplish-black color and bleeding from all 7 orifices. Moreover, the stomach that was bitten by the 2 poisonous teeth had been torn open by the force of the throw, and the intestines and internal organs had been thrown out. Awang rushed out of the vault. Bullets and level 2 and 3 psychic abilities hit him, but he didn't care at all. He directly pounced on them without dodging. With one claw, he pressed down one of them and opened his mouth to bite off the entire head. Awang! Accidentally, he directly bit off the head and swallowed it. Awang, you're eating random things again. Lin Xiao suddenly shouted at Awang. As soon as she shouted, Lu Wan and the others immediately noticed their figures. It's you! Lu Wan stared fiercely at where Lin Xiao and the others were. He was not stupid. He heard the female leader's sudden shout. Looking at the bloody mouth of the giant dog behind them, he knew that she had sent it to deal with them. Lin Xiao's figure flashed, and she appeared on a lamppost a dozen meters away from Lu Wan and the others. She looked down at Lu Wan and the others who were still alive and sneered. Didn't you follow us here? Why? Surprised? Her meaning was clear. She had directly pointed out the other party's goal and intention. Lu Wan's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly realized something. He glared at her and gritted his teeth. You know everything? From this woman's words, he immediately knew that she already knew their plan. He didn't expect that the plan they had thought was so well planned would be seen clearly by others. This made Lu Wan suddenly feel that he and Zhuo Chun were like a few clowns, being watched by others as if they were watching a show. The others did not take them seriously at all. The humiliation of being looked down upon rose in his heart, and it made Lu Wan's heart burn with anger. At this time, Lu Wan only had the psychic covered in cold sweat, and the other level 3 psychic. The giant dog had already pounced on one of them in the vault, and it had pounced on him again after coming out. The other one had been snatched away by the mutant snake on the roof. Lin Xiao smiled faintly and looked at him with narrowed eyes. Yes, I know what you guys want to do. Do you know why Lu Jun and Lin Wenwen's progress is so slow? Of course it's because we all know what you guys want to do. So what information do you think you can get? But that Zhuo Chun is out of my expectations. I haven't even done anything yet. and he has already thrown himself into the poisonous insect's nest. Hee, I can go visit him when I get back. Maybe I can make him unable to cure the poison forever? Chapter 904. Yu. Lu Wan was so angry that he was about to vomit blood, but he didn't know what to say. Anyway, it was useless to say anything now. They had been exposed, and they didn't even have a chance to escape. We didn't do anything to harm the base, did we? Don't you think it's too cruel for you, the leader, to treat us so ruthlessly? The spiritual type ability user suddenly spoke up at this time. His expression already ugly. His face was pale and sweaty, and his lips were blue. Even the area around his eyes began to darken. But at this time, Lu Wan and the other person were no longer paying attention to him. Hearing this, Lu Wan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he shouted at Lin Xiao. Yes, that's right. Even if we had some bad intentions towards you in the beginning, we haven't done anything bad to your base now. What right do you have to kill us? Lin Xiao sneered and said, Is it not a crime to have criminal consciousness and attempt to commit a crime? Do I have to wait for you to take my base into your hands before I have the right to resist you? Besides, do you think this is still the peaceful society before doomsday? We don't care about the law, morality, or anything else. We only care about the law of the jungle. Then she suddenly waved her hand. Woof, go. Bite him. Yes, that's the one. Dahe, bite that, yes, that one. The last one, mushroom spirit, don't eat it. Eat this one alive. Duan Wan and the others watched as Lin Xiao commanded the 3 animals and plants to rush towards the 3 people. Even the mushroom spirit, who was picking up the bodies and absorbing the blood, was called over. However, the mushroom spirit was eating happily and ignored Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao, this mushroom spirit is so disobedient. Should I use it to make a chicken stew when I get back? Ah, don't kill me. The level 3 paranormal turned around and ran, not forgetting to shout. Startled by Lin Xiao's murderous intent, the mushroom spirit immediately dropped the body it was eating, swung its tentacles and legs, and chased after the escaping level 3 paranormal. In the eyes of the mushroom spirit, this person was running in slow motion. In the next second, the mushroom spirit had already jumped up and directly trampled on the level 3 metahuman, who was still running. The roots covered the dumbfounded rank 3 metahuman and pierced straight into the cement floor. Several tentacles on the umbrella quickly pierced into the body of the rank 3 metahuman through the gaps of the roots. Ah! A blood-curdling screech immediately resounded. Blood and flesh gushed out from the mushroom spirit's tentacles. After a while, the mushroom spirit pulled out its roots and walked away with a few strong legs. All that was left was a dried corpse that had its flesh and blood sucked dry. On the other side, Lu Wan was a level 6 ability user. His Earth Wall, Earth Spike, and Earth Fissure abilities prevented Ah Wang from dealing any substantial damage to him. Spirit-type espers were physically weak to begin with, and their attacks were all mental attacks. But at this time, his whole body was as cold as ice. His mind was already in a mess, and the effect of his special ability attack had been greatly reduced. Moreover, his ability was only at level 5, and his mental attack would not have any effect on a level 6 mutated beast. Therefore, he didn't plan to attack from the start. Instead, he planned to flee. If Big Black could let him escape, it wouldn't be a level 6 mutated beast. The spiritual type ability user had only taken a few steps when a black shadow suddenly flashed in front of him. A huge snake had rushed in front of him and turned around to face him. It had a pair of cold and emotionless diamond-shaped eyes, and a slender forked tongue flashed in the flat snake mouth. The spiritual type ability user felt the threat of death looming in front of him. His eyes widened. He didn't know if he had a mental breakdown or if the virus in his body was acting up, but his legs gave way and he knelt on the ground. He stared blankly at the huge black snake that was less than 2 meters away from him. All the strength in his body disappeared. Big Black wasn't in the mood to play with him. It stared at him for 2 seconds before it suddenly opened its mouth and revealed a pair of sharp teeth. Then it bit down with a cold glint. Lin Xiao and the others looked coldly at Lu Wan, who was the last one standing. After defending against Ah Wang's attacks for a few minutes, Wang smashed a wall with his claws and went through it. Then he pounced on Lu Wan. Lu Wan was pounced on. When he looked up, he saw a big mouth with 2 rows of fangs coming toward his face. After that, he didn't know what happened. Pfft! After being scolded by Lin Xiao, Wang didn't bite off half of Lu Wan's head. Instead, he threw his head to the side and spat out a few mouthfuls of bloody saliva. Of course, the blood didn't belong to him. All right, we can go back now. Lin Xiao clapped her hands and leaped down from the street lamp with a look of finishing up. With a wave of his hand, he tossed out an off-road vehicle and got into the back seat. She thought that Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen would get into the driver's seat and the passenger's seat as usual. However, as soon as she got into the car, the door next to her opened. Naturally, Wu Qingyue came in. Lin Xiao was stunned. He turned his head and saw that Xiao Liqing was grabbing the arm of his personal guard, Duan Wan, and dragging her away. Although Duan Wan had been looking back, she didn't stop walking. Xin Yuzhen climbed into the driver's seat and started the car, pretending that she didn't know anything. Lin Xiao was speechless. After enduring for a while, she couldn't take it anymore. She turned her head and glared at Wu Qingyue, who was sitting next to her. "Leader Wu, your car is over there." She gritted her teeth and pointed at Duan Wan, who was being dragged into another car by Xiao Liqing. Wu Qingyue looked at her with a smile and said, "I know, but I think little Qing likes Duan Wan. Why don't we let them be together? Let's give them some space." Lin Xiao was speechless. "Which eye of yours saw that kind of atmosphere between the two of them? You were the one who had bad intentions, okay? You even pushed the blame to him." Xiao Liqing, who was the scapegoat, didn't know that he had become the man who liked Duan Wan. He had obviously dragged Duan Wan over to create an opportunity for his leader. Who knew if he would directly push Duan Wan back after hearing Wu Qingyue's words? Xin Yuzhen sympathetically looked at the car behind them through the rearview mirror. Based on her previous understanding of Leader Wu, he had already lied. This wasn't the first time, and it definitely wouldn't be the last. It seemed like little Xiao was ready to be sold by his leader. Although she knew that she couldn't laugh, Xin Yuzhen couldn't help but squint her eyes. The corners of her mouth twitched, but she didn't let herself laugh out loud. "Ha ha ha. What an unlucky child." Xiao Liqing, who was sitting in the back seat, felt an inexplicable chill. He looked left and right in confusion. The sky was still gloomy, and the air was too humid. The weather was indeed a bit cold. Chapter 905. Lin Xiao retracted her gaze and looked at him coldly. "Do you think I'm blind? Why can't I see that Xiao Liqing is interested in Duan Wan?" Wu Qingyue smiled and said, "If I say there is, then there is." Lin Xiao looked at him. After this person sobered up, his expression changed back to that of a smiling fox. His smile was very fake, and his originally beautiful eyes were curved into the shape of a moon. It covered up the emotions in his eyes, and also the originally beautiful eyes. She suddenly missed those cold and emotionless eyes. Seeing this female zombie suddenly staring at his eyes, Wu Qingyue's eyes lit up. This guy doesn't seem to know the change in his aura? Didn't she realize that her attitude towards him was a bit different? "Tell me, what did you do to me before? With your current situation, you can't directly knock me out. Besides, I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere." There seemed to be a sweet taste in his mouth. This should be the taste in her mouth. Wu Qingyue moved his neck and raised his hand to touch his head. He couldn't help but glance at Lin Xiao's lips again. His expression was like a cat that had stolen a fish. The smell of her body was still very pleasant. He didn't feel anything on his neck and head. It didn't seem like he was knocked out. In that case, he must have drunk the medicine in her base. Lin Xiao looked at him and said expressionlessly, "Anne, I didn't knock you out. I just made you drink the medicine." Saying that, she turned her head away unnaturally and didn't look at him. The numb feeling in her mouth from his tongue seemed to still remain on her lips. She didn't expect that this man, who usually looked gentle and smiling, would kiss her as if he wanted to swallow her whole. After removing his pretense, he was like a wild beast, tyrannical, but thinking that he was already crazy, but he could still maintain a sense of protection for Ling Ling and herself. This made Lin Xiao slightly untie something in her heart, and she didn't reject him as much as before. Thinking of this, Lin Xiao's heart suddenly shook, and she finally realized that the change in her feelings towards Wu Chengyue was a bit out of her control. This made her feel a bit lost, and for a moment she was at a loss. However, she quickly suppressed the confusion and helplessness in her heart, and adjusted her expression without changing her expression. Wu Chengyue looked at her with a meaningful smile. When adepts go berserk, they won't cooperate obediently. We all know that. Although I don't remember this part of my memory, I don't think I would be so obedient to drink the potion, right? He had already guessed what had happened between the two of them, but he didn't know the details. Looking at the unscathed female zombie, she was able to get close to him when he was in a frenzy. If his energy wasn't avoiding her, then his instincts didn't mean to hurt her. Since she was willing to force him to drink the potion, did it mean that she had already accepted him a little? But at this time, the female zombie shrunk herself into her shell and avoided him, which made Wu Chengyue a little nervous. In the past, no matter how he flirted with her, she would always respond coldly and never run away. But now she began to run away. Did that mean that she had begun to care about him? The more he thought about it, the more Wu Chengyue wanted to know her answer. Looking at the side of the female zombie's face, his eyes unconsciously fell on her light purple lips. After so long, the color only faded a little. Was it because the blood in a zombie's body didn't flow? He remembered the last time when they were in the water he kissed her lips. Although the color looked very light, but the taste was very delicious. Soft, bouncy, and a little cool. This time, he kissed her lips into a purplish-red color. Obviously, he used a lot of force at that time. Unfortunately, he didn't have any memory of it. What a loss. Lin Xiao felt uncomfortable being stared at by him. She also suddenly found that her feelings for him had changed subtly. It made her heart a little messy. Now that she was being stared at by him, she couldn't bear it anymore. She didn't know why, but she felt like she was a little hot. Was it an illusion? Although you went berserk, you still retained a trace of rational instincts. You knew to recognize me and Lingling, so you didn't reject us. I gave you a cup of water, and you drank it directly. Nothing else happened. She looked straight ahead and said with no expression. She didn't dare to look at his eyes. Wu Chengyue was surprised and said with some disbelief, "It can be like this? Then why didn't I feel anything at all? Is that right, Xiaozhen?" Then he suddenly turned his head and asked Shen Yuzhen, who was driving in the front. Shen Yuzhen was listening to the conversation between the two when she suddenly heard Wu Chengyue ask her. She replied, "Leader Wu, your situation seems to be a little special. You can still control your energy. It's not like the others. Their energy is so violent that they can't be controlled." Wu Chengyue nodded. Even Shen Yuzhen said so. It seemed that his situation was indeed better than the others. But of course, he wouldn't believe what this female zombie said when she gave him a cup of water. He would drink it. If that was the case, then what was with the color of her mouth? Could it be that she still wanted to ask for benefits for herself when she went berserk? If that was the case, then her reaction shouldn't be like this, right? He thought that he might have kissed her forcefully, but she didn't show any disgust or hatred. Wu Chengyue looked at Lin Xiao's eyes a lot deeper. But looking at the female zombie's current appearance of running away, Wu Chengyue appropriately restrained his aura. He couldn't force her too much. What if her emotions were a little unstable, and she ran away after being stimulated? It seemed that he had to slowly lure her out of that shell, or catch her before she completely retreated. Thinking about it, Wu Chengyue changed the topic. Right, why did we come so far? I remember that the range of movement of psychics when they go berserk doesn't seem to be large. Even if you want to lure me out of your base, you don't have to lure me this far, right? This was Lin Xiao's problem. Her eyes flashed and said, "If I don't lure you further away, I'm afraid that you will run back to our base." Shen Yuzhen was a little confused about this problem, because at that time, she felt that their leader's aura suddenly disappeared for a while, and then Wu Chengyue's energy skyrocketed like crazy. After a while, he quickly rushed in the direction of the downtown area. Shi Duan Wan Xiaoli Cheng and the others didn't know what was going on. They thought it was their leader's ability. Now hearing Lin Xiao say this, Shen Yuzhen was even more certain. Chapter 906. Wu Qinghua stopped talking, and Shen Yuzhen was driving seriously. Lin Xiao silently stared at Wu Qinghua. She couldn't wait to return to the base and separate from this person. And this person's gaze was getting more and more sticky, even more sticky than before he went crazy. Lin Xiao could even feel that there was a bit of joy and pride in his eyes, especially in this small car space. His breath seemed to be magnified several times. Before, she didn't feel anything, except for a bit of annoyance. She didn't think anything else. Now Lin Xiao's mood was different from before. Her reaction to this was a bit sensitive. Under Wu Qinghua's hunter-like gaze, she felt very uncomfortable, and could only pretend to be calm. After returning to the base, Wu Qinghua pulled Lin Xiao to the hospital. He planned to check on Lingling's condition, and then ask Lin how to check on the female zombie. Lin Xiao's hand was grabbed by him, and he pulled her away in front of everyone. She wanted to shake him off, but he held her tightly. She couldn't shake his hand off for a while. She frowned and looked at him. "Can you let go? I can walk by myself." Wu Qinghua turned back and looked at her with a smile. "You will walk but not with me." Lin Xiao sat in the car with him all the way and was stared at by him. She had wanted to escape for a long time. Now that they finally returned to the base, they could finally separate. How could she continue to walk with him? "No need, I still have something to do. Leader Wu should really want to know about Lingling's current condition. I won't accompany you," Lin Xiao said coldly, but she waved at him in her heart. Go. Don't be an eyesore in front of me." Wu Qinghua looked at her in different expression, and only smiled faintly. There was still a faint smile in his eyes. He looked at her calmly for a few seconds, thought about it and didn't force it. He nodded and said, "Okay then." Then he could only let go of Lin Xiao's hand reluctantly. Her skin was still very smooth, but it was cold without any temperature. But it was still soft, and had the elasticity of a living person. Xiao Liqing pulled his hand back, and immediately got into his own car. At this time, Duanwan also quickly got out of Xiao Liqing's car, quickly climbed up, and drove to the second base. Since Lu Wan and the others are dead, let's get rid of Zhuo Chun and the others in the base as soon as possible. After returning to the office, Lin Xiao called Xia Dong, Qiu Lili, Elmar and the others over. "Are we going to attack them all?" Qiu Lili's eyes lit up as she looked at her. "Release all the evidence in your hands. If it's not enough, add more to it until it's enough," Lin Xiao said expressionlessly, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. Apart from the dozen or so people that Lu Wan had brought out, there were still about 100 or 200 people left in the base. However, more than half of the leaders were gone. There was still Zhuo Chun and 3 other rank 5 metahumans here to oversee the plan. Xia Dong nodded and said in a hoarse voice, "I understand." Lin Xiao turned to look at Elmar. "You go find Yuan Tianxing, and tell him that we are going to capture them tonight. You take Asi and the old man and guard outside the base. Don't let anyone escape." What she meant was for Asi, Old Gua, and the other rank 1 metahumans to each take a team of rank 3 and rank 4 zombies to guard the base. Elmar would be in charge. "Okay, got it. If they want to escape from our hands, let's see if they have the ability to do so." Elmar sneered. The more powerful metahumans were either dead or lying on the ground after being poisoned. What could these fishes, prawns, and crabs do to them? Be discreet and don't alert the others in the base. Don't let your guard down. Even if they are just ordinary people, don't underestimate them. Lin Xiao glared at Elmar and scolded her coldly. "Oh, got it." Elmar was speechless after being glared at by Lin Xiao. After planning the operation, Lin Xiao dismissed the meeting. Then she waved her hand and chased everyone away. Xia Dong was the last to stay. After watching Lin Xiao get up from the sofa and sit down at her desk, he walked to her desk and said, "People from several bases in Wuxia have already set off for Haicheng. I don't know if they got the information that Leader Wu is going crazy. They seem to be in a hurry this time." Lin Xiao frowned. "So fast. It seems that there are too many people in Haicheng. There are many spies. The people from Wuxia have secretly brought a lot of advanced and powerful weapons this time. In addition to the trading team sent on the surface, they also sent 2 groups of people to sneak in from 2 different directions. These 2 groups of people all have powerful weapons, and the teams are made up of rank 3 to rank 5 metahumans. It seems that they are not coming with good intentions. Xiedong said. The Wuxia base was now the most technologically advanced base in the country. It could also be considered a city of technology. Therefore, the research on weapons was not much slower than other advanced equipment. They were always able to quickly develop new powerful and energy-saving weapons. Has Haiqing received the news? Lin Xiao quickly relaxed her eyebrows and asked faintly. In any case, this problem was not her headache right now. It should be Wu Qingyue's headache. Just as well, it was best to do something to lure him away. She did not want to see him at all now. Xiedong nodded. Leader Wu should be receiving it soon. Lin Xiao waved her hand at him. Alright, this is his problem. We'll just watch and not interfere. Xiedong turned and walked to the door, but he stopped before he reached the door. He stepped to the side and stood still by the door. Lin Xiao saw his action and looked at the door blankly. She sensed Lu Jun's aura coming over. A few seconds later, Lu Jun came back with a pile of documents with her head lowered. Every time she came here, she liked to look at the documents while walking. She did not know when she had developed this habit. Lu Jun walked in with her head lowered. She smelled Xiedong's aura as soon as she entered. She raised her head and saw that this person was already standing quietly by the door. It was obvious that he had let her in before she did. Lu Jun smiled awkwardly at him and nodded as a greeting when he thought about how they had bumped into each other a few times before. After greeting him, she walked straight to Lin Xiao's table and sat down on the chair in front of it. This is the first harvest. It's just vegetables. The rest will take a while, but it'll be done soon. Hurry up and get rid of those rats outside the cultivation base. They're wandering around the periphery every day. It's annoying to look at them. She was not afraid of thieves, but she was afraid of being targeted by thieves. If she did not get rid of them completely, they would come to bother her again and again. Lin Xiao nodded. We'll do it tonight. We can use this matter to get rid of them. Lu Jun's eyes lit up. Oh, are we going to do it? Do I ignore Hua Xiaoheng? Lin Xiao looked at the documents she brought and glanced at her. Up to you. Chapter 907. In the medical center of the base. What? They didn't come back after hunting for zombies? You said they went out to hunt for supplies? Zuo-chun laid on his bed angrily, glaring at the subordinate who came to report. Of course not. But this is what the base is saying now, not what we are saying. But Brother Wan and the rest did go out to collect supplies and hunt for zombies. But they haven't come back. Also, Wu Qingyue and the female leader from Haiqing have come back safely, the subordinate explained. Hearing this, Zuo-chun couldn't believe it. His face was gloomy, and he fell silent. His originally pale face looked like a dying man. Lu Wan had brought more than a dozen elite subordinates with him, because he wanted to take advantage of the fact that Duan Wan and Xin Yuzhen hadn't brought anyone else out this time. He thought that he could take this opportunity to capture the two women. There were only 4 of them, and the strongest one was the level 6 metahuman from Haiqing. Lu Wan himself was a level 6 metahuman, and he brought 2 level 5 metahumans, and more than a dozen people with him. His strength far surpassed them, but now they came back to tell him that Lu Wan and his men couldn't come back? Did you send someone to the scene to confirm the news? Zuo-chun asked coldly. We did, but they haven't come back yet. Zuo-chun frowned and didn't say anything. If Lu Wan and his men were all dead, they shouldn't have been killed by Duan Wan and the rest. In terms of strength, they weren't a match for Lu Wan and his men. Did they encounter some other situation? Or did they encounter a zombie king? A level 6 mutant beast that went berserk? Recently, many mutant beasts outside had gone berserk, and their attack power was twice as high as usual. Moreover, there were zombies everywhere, man-eating zombies. Anyway, there were too many factors of death outside the base. Zuo-chun didn't expect that Lu Wan, a level 6 metahuman, wouldn't be able to come back alive. And he felt that something was wrong. Why did the female leader spread the news of Lu Wan and his men's deaths the moment she came back? Didn't she even send someone to confirm it? However, Zuo-chun didn't know that the person they sent to confirm the news probably wouldn't come back. In another ward of the medical center, Wu Qingyue sat by the bed and looked at the unconscious Lingling. He was thankful that he hadn't done anything to hurt Lingling back then. If anything happened to Lingling, he would regret it for the rest of his life. Lin Hao, who was outside the door, walked in. After checking Lingling's condition, he said to Wu Qingyue, "Her body is fine, but she already has a mental illness. You probably scared her this time. After waking up, there would probably be some effects. You'd better prepare yourself. You'd better go get her favorite toy." Hearing this, Wu Qingyue was stunned, and then his face turned pale. Right, Lingling's illness. How could he suddenly forget about this? His body was fine now, but his condition must have scared Lingling. Moreover, he had knocked her out, which must have affected her psychologically. Because she had been staying here recently, Lingling would occasionally go to the female zombie's place to play, so she accepted 2 more companions. He had become a lot more cheerful. He could smile like a normal child, and could even speak briefly. He just wasn't used to it yet. If that was the case, he could only go and find the female zombie. She was the only one who could cure Lingling's mental illness. Quickly calming down, Wu Qingyue nodded. "I understand." After saying that, he thought about it and said to Lin Hao seriously, "Your leader's body has a problem. You'd better check it out as soon as possible." Although he didn't want Lin Hao to have too much contact with the female zombie, but when it came to illness, he had no other choice. He didn't want to see any problems with the female zombie's body. Like Lingling, this was the second person he cared about the most. Lin Hao was stunned. Then his expression became anxious and asked, "What happened to her? What did you find?" Seeing that Lin Hao was so anxious, it didn't seem like he was pretending. Wu Qingyue stared at his eyes seriously. After confirming that the other party really cared about the female zombie, he felt annoyed. But he had to tell him about Lin Xiao's situation. Her ability seems to have disappeared. After saying that, he couldn't help but taunt. "What's the use of telling you? You're here to cure people, not zombies." Lin Hao looked at him coldly and said, "Then aren't you going to tell me?" Seeing that he was actually very unwilling to talk to him, but had to say it, Lin Hao felt inexplicably good in his heart. But thinking about Lin Xiao's situation, Lin Hao frowned. Other than the disappearance of ability, is there any other situation? Wu Qingyue shook his head and said coldly, "I haven't found anything yet." Lin Hao clearly knew his sister's personality. She definitely wouldn't be willing to listen to this man and obediently give her a checkup. "You want me to check and find out how to help her, but you won't bring the person over. Even if I have the intention, I still need to see the person." He shrugged and looked at Wu Qingyue with a look of contempt. Wu Qingyue endured the anger in his heart from being ridiculed and said expressionlessly, "Don't you know her better than me? Don't you know that she's a workaholic? That female zombie used work as an excuse to run away as soon as she came back. He also wanted to bring the person over, but he couldn't force her. He didn't want to argue with her again at this time. Otherwise, the slightly better atmosphere from before would be gone again." Seeing Wu Qingyue's expression of holding back, Lin Hao turned around and left in a good mood. But he could guess that when Wu Qingyue said that Lin Xiao's ability was changed, it probably had something to do with the baby in her belly. It was just changing her ability. As long as it didn't change her vitality, it would be fine. The biggest possibility was that after giving birth to the child, her condition would slowly recover. Although he thought about Lin Xiao's situation from a medical point of view, no matter what, she wasn't a normal person. Special situations still needed special treatment. It was better to quickly bring the person over for a checkup. Sigh. Now that their mother had become a zombie, her mind still hadn't woken up. There was no one who could control this fellow, because once she started working, even the 3 of them together couldn't beat her. Wu Qingyue looked at Lin Hao's back as he left, and took a deep breath. He silently said in his heart, "This is all for the good of that female zombie. All for her own good. Have to endure." After all, apart from Lin Hao, he didn't dare to let other doctors examine the female zombie. So in the afternoon, Lin Xiao ran to Yuan Tianqing's office and called Elmar and the other 2. They began to plan how to deal with Lu Wan's remaining gang. Those that left the base, they were directly killed outside the base. Clean and neat. Chapter 908. The next morning, the people in the base saw the base's army escorting a group of more than 100 people out of the base in a few trucks. Seeing those people squatting in the trucks with their hands tied and eyes blindfolded, the crowd became curious. Since it had nothing to do with them, they wouldn't mind it getting bigger. What's going on? What's going on? I don't know. Let's go ask. I'll go ask a friend. He works in the base's army. He should know something. Not long after, everyone slowly began to inquire about the news. Hey, I heard that this group of people has been restless ever since they entered the base. It seems that they're planning to sell the situation of our base to other bases. Ever since he joined us, he has been secretly investigating the situation of the cultivation base in our base. Also I heard that they also have ideas about our base's beautiful leader. It seems that they want to do something bad to her. But from the looks of it, they obviously didn't succeed. Just them? You even dare to have ideas about our leader's head? Don't they think about why the base was chosen here? If they didn't have some ability, who would dare to build a base here? Although the zombie city here isn't as scary as the one in the south, the population here isn't small. It seems that they were all wiped out by the base. The onlookers all had curious looks on their faces, while those who had come in with Lu Wan were all panicking and trying to prove their innocence. They didn't know what Lu Wan and the others were planning. It seems that these people are going to be thrown out of the base. They have no weapons and no food. I don't know how long they can survive outside. They deserve it. These are all people from Hidden Cloud City. Their deaths are not to be regretted. The person who spoke was originally from the Netherworld King's base. Although many people had joined the base recently, the original Netherworld King's base knew that they couldn't refuse this situation. They slowly accepted it, but the hatred in their hearts still didn't disappear. Now that they saw that the people who were being taken out were almost all people from Hidden Cloud City. Therefore, the original Netherworld King's base was secretly very happy. After Zhua Chun fell asleep in the hospital that night, he didn't wake up the next day. Soon, the result of the doctor was that the poison in his body had acted up, and they couldn't find an antidote. 3 vehicles drove more than 100 people out of the base's safe zone and directly sent them to the Westlake District's zoo. Only then did he leave everyone behind. Elmar stood in front of these people with Asi, Awu, Alu and Old Mingua. She said to them, "Now, you're being punished for disturbing the security of the base and betraying and selling confidential information of the base. In the future, the Universal Base will no longer welcome you." These were just empty words. The base could not take their lives because of these crimes. However, they could be directly expelled and could only rely on other bases. If the other bases didn't want them, then they could only become bandits during the apocalypse. Under normal circumstances, if they wanted to enter other bases, they would be investigated thoroughly. Not just anyone would be accepted. For example, Xie Dong had basically investigated all the people that the Universal Life Base had accepted. Moreover, it was obvious that they were all from Hidden Cloud City and Earth Dragon. As long as they weren't evil and hadn't committed any crimes that would harm the survival base, they would be fine. Basically, anyone could come in. However, if he wanted to go through the small door, that would depend on his ability. After Elmar finished speaking, she did not say anything else. He turned around and said, "Retreat. Let's go back." The more than 100 people who were left behind were like mutes. They did not make a sound, nor did they shout. They just maintained their original posture and waited for the people of the Universal Life Base to leave. However, they did not expect that after Elmar's car left, countless zombies quietly appeared from all directions, slowly encircling this group of people. Then they stood there quietly and waited. When the more than 100 people heard the sound of the car getting farther and farther away, they finally couldn't help but move. They took off their blindfolds or headgear, and what entered their eyes was a wall of ferocious and terrifying zombies. "Ah dash! Roar dash! Hey hey!" When they shouted, the zombies all rushed forward as if they had received some kind of order. "You still dare to come here?" Lu Jun looked at the somewhat embarrassed man in front of her in surprise. What Antong looked at her, his eyes a little cold. "You really know why I approached you, so you have been avoiding my topic. Are you playing with me like an idiot?" He thought that this woman clearly knew everything in her heart, but she pretended not to know anything and watched him act. In his heart, he decided to laugh at him like an idiot. Hua Antong stared at Lu Jun's expression became angry, and the blue veins on his forehead appeared because of his anger. Looking at the other party's gloomy expression, Lu Jun just sneered and said, "What, you can't get that level 5 corpse core? So you want to blame it on me? Why don't you think about whether you have misjudged me? If you want to do things for others, you have to see the other party's strength." Seeing the ridicule in Lu Jun's eyes, Hua Antong's heart immediately exploded with anger. "If I don't have a good time, you won't have a good time either. Hee, if you still want your son's life, then bring me 3 level 5 corpse cores or energy cores. Believe me, I only want 3 corpse cores or energy cores, and your son's life will belong to you. Otherwise, don't blame me for being cruel." After saying that, Hua Antong's eyes flashed with a fierce light and grinned. Lu Jun was stunned after hearing this, and her heart was flustered, but she did not show it on her face. She said calmly, "My son is fine. Do you think you can fool me?" No wonder she couldn't smell Tong Tong's scent from just now. Was he really taken away by this man? At this moment, the two of them were at the place where Lu Jun suddenly discovered that Tong Tong was missing. She was about to go look for him, but after searching for a while, she couldn't find him. Even his scent had disappeared. Just as she was secretly anxious, Hua Antong appeared in a hidden place. "Believe it or not, you can do it yourself. I'll give you 3 days. If you haven't prepared the things, then watch as I send your son's limbs over one by one." Hua Antong smiled very proudly and also very ferocious. His eyes overflowed with hostility, and the aura on his body also became very violent. After saying that, Hua Antong retreated and then disappeared. He didn't realize that after he left, Lu Jun's expression didn't panic. Lu Jun's expression did not panic. Instead, he calmed down. Since he said that Tong Tong was in his hands, then she would be able to find him by secretly following his scent. In the end, before she could find him, Xiedong already appeared on the other side with a child in his arms. "Are you still going to run around in the future? Be careful, your mother will spank you," Xiedong said to Tong Tong with an expressionless face and a hoarse voice. He was afraid that his voice would be too unpleasant and scare the child. He tried to soften his voice. Chapter 909. Tong Tong looked at the uncle who was holding him. Although he wasn't familiar with him, he still knew him. He remembered that he was taken away by the annoying uncle, who had been appearing frequently recently. That person was even fierce towards him. Throw him. He wasn't allowed to cry. If he cried, he would be beaten. Later, he locked himself in a small dark room. He was so afraid that he could only cry softly. His hands and feet were tied up and his mouth was sealed. He could only make nasal sounds when he cried. When he was about to fall asleep from crying, the door to the small dark room was suddenly opened. Then he saw another uncle come in and carry him. "I'll take you to your mother now. Don't be afraid." Xiedong held the child in front of his chest and held Tong Tong's, but with his arm. Tong Tong put one hand on Xiedong's shoulder and used the other to wipe his tears on his face. Hearing Xiedong's words, he nodded. After a while, when Hua Antong sneaked back, he saw that the door to the secret underground room, where he locked the child, was wide open. His heart skipped a beat, and he immediately ran down to take a look. Sure enough, the child wasn't inside. Bang! Hua Antong angrily hit the door. The child wasn't here. His bargaining chip was gone. He couldn't get the zombie core either. Hua Antong took a deep breath and stared at the place where the child was with a gloomy expression. He thought that the woman might still think that her son was in his hands. As long as she brought the item over, he would have a way to make her give it to him. However, he didn't know that Lu Jun had restrained her aura and was following them silently. Lu Jun stood outside and didn't follow them in. She could smell the scent left behind by her son, but the source of the scent was no longer here. She sniffed left and right, and immediately smelled another familiar scent. It's Xiedong. Why would Xiedong appear here? Moreover, his scent was mixed with her son's scent, and was heading in the other direction. Lu Jun's eyes lit up when she smelled her son's scent coming from that direction. She seemed to have guessed something. She quickly rushed in that direction. Xiadong walked with Tong Tong in his arms. Suddenly he stopped. He turned around and looked behind him, as if he was waiting for something. Very soon a figure appeared. "Mommy!" As soon as he saw his mother appear, Tong Tong's gloomy expression changed. She shouted at Lu Jun joyfully. At the same time, she leaned out and stretched out her hands to Lu Jun, asking for a hug. "Tong Tong, how are you feeling? Are you hurt? Did that bad guy hit you?" Lu Jun rushed over and carried Tong Tong over. Then, he anxiously checked Tong Tong's body to see if his son was injured. "Mom, that person is so annoying." Tong Tong pouted and looked unhappy as she hugged Lu Jun's neck and said coquettishly, "I just took a look. Tong Tong is slightly injured. He must have been kicked or hit by someone." A hoarse but not deep voice rang out. Xiadong looked at Lu Jun and said, "I happened to be passing by and smelled Tong Tong's scent. I felt that it was impossible for Tong Tong to appear here, so I followed the scent to take a look. I didn't expect to see him tied up in a basement." "Thank you, Xiadong." Lu Jun looked at Xiadong and felt very grateful. Her panicked heart had finally calmed down. "Was it Hua Antong?" Xiadong turned around and asked as he walked back. Among the people that they had cleaned up today, only Hua Antong had not been caught yet. He didn't know how to hide for a while. Now that something happened to Lu Jun, it should be Hua Antong, who had been in contact with her recently. Xiadong naturally guessed who the murderer was. "He asked me to give him 3 level 5 corpse cores." Lu Jun followed his footsteps and said briefly. Xiadong nodded and understood the meaning behind Lu Jun's words. Hua Antong was making a final gamble. He wasn't willing to leave just like that. He wanted to grab some benefits at the end. Xiadong didn't say anything else. Hua Antong wasn't a good person to begin with, but to make a move on a 3 or 4-year-old child was too tasteless. "Tong Tong, did you say thank you to Uncle Xia? You were saved by Uncle Xia. Remember this kindness in the future, okay?" At this time, Lu Jun suddenly said to Tong Tong. Xiadong turned his head to look at her, and then at Tong Tong. Tong Tong turned his head to look at Xiadong and said clearly, "Thank you, Uncle Xia." Xiadong's eyes warmed and nodded slightly. Then he raised his hand and touched Tong Tong's head. After Tong Tong thanked Xiadong, he turned his head back and buried it in his mother's neck. He acted a little shy, but he didn't reject Xiadong's existence. "Hold Tong Tong and stay here." The two of them went back to the basement and sniffed Hua Antong's scent. After smelling Hua Antong's scent, they immediately chased in another direction. After Hua Antong left the basement, he immediately hid in another place. Currently, the empty houses in the base were very big. There weren't many residential areas, because there weren't many people in the base. Therefore, Hua Antong randomly found an empty house to hide in. Xiadong followed Hua Antong's scent and stopped on the roof of the building that Hua Antong was staying in. He didn't have any scent on his body. On one hand, he was used to it, and on the other hand, he didn't want to startle Hua Antong. Hua Antong was a rank 4 metahuman, so he couldn't sense a rank 6 zombie king that had restrained its aura. Just when he was sitting on the floor of the innermost room, on the 3rd floor of the building with an expressionless face, he was actually very uneasy. A figure suddenly appeared at the door. When Hua Antong saw someone, he subconsciously turned around and wanted to rush out from the only window in the room. At this time, he didn't have the mood to care about who appeared. Since the other party could appear so close to him without making a sound, he must be stronger than him. Therefore, Hua Antong instinctively chose to run away. However, the other party was faster than him. Before Hua Antong could reach the window, the other party had already arrived. Before Hua Antong could rush to the window, the other party had already appeared by the window in a flash and kicked him. Bang dash. Hua Antong, who had rushed to the window, was directly kicked back to his original position and directly hit the wall. Hua Antong directly slid down the wall due to the pain from the heavy blow to his abdomen and the pain from hitting the wall. He couldn't get up anymore. "You shouldn't have done this to a child." Xiadong looked at Hua Antong with disgust. After saying that, he stretched out his claws and suddenly scratched Hua Antong's body. The virus quickly infected Hua Antong's body. This way, he would have a reason to kill him. Chapter 910. When Xie Dong brought Hua Antong to Lu Jun, Xie Dong threw Hua Antong to the ground. Lu Jun looked at Hua Antong with Tong Tong in her arms. She looked at Xie Dong and said, "Did you infect him?" Xie Dong didn't say anything and just nodded. Lu Jun said, "Actually, it's okay to kill him. He dared to touch my Tong Tong. It's a capital offense." Then, her eyes flashed with killing intent. Harming children in the base was a capital crime. Just like Chun Hao, who had touched Lin Xiaolu and Tong Tong. The only result was that they were dead. What's more, there were only 2 kids in the entire base. Hua Antong, whose body was alternating between hot and cold, heard their conversation and felt that something was wrong. But when he thought about his body's reaction, he listened to the woman's words. He suddenly thought of something. Those who were infected by the virus would feel hot and cold like this. Eventually, their bodies would become cold, and they wouldn't be able to feel their own temperature. Hua Antong suddenly turned his head and looked at his arm. The skin there was cut by Xie Dong. At this time, the wound was black and festering, and a rotten smell came from the wound. You're not human." He suddenly turned his head and looked at Xie Dong in horror. But he soon felt that something was wrong, because Xie Dong's body didn't look like a zombie at all. His facial features were normal. There were no dark eyes, no torn mouth, no dark circles under his eyes, and his skin was clean and smooth. Apart from being a little pale, he was no different from a normal person. More importantly, he could talk. How could a zombie talk? No, you're human. You're not a zombie. The cold and dizzy feeling made Hua Antong lose his mind. He muttered to himself. Looking at Hua Antong's dark eyes and face that was gradually turning green, Lu Jun didn't want to talk to him anymore. Lu Jun was too lazy to talk to him anymore. He pulled out the pistol he always carried with him and pointed it at his forehead. Bang dash! After putting the gun away, Lu Jun put 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. Soon, a figure appeared in front of the 2. Take out his energy core and throw him out of the base. Lu Jun pointed at the corpse on the ground and said, "Be stealthy." The zombie nodded, walked over to pick up the corpse, turned around and quickly left the sight of the 2 people. Lu Jun and Xie Dong turned and walked to the second base. On the other side, Lin Hao appeared in the office of Lin Xiao's second base and kept trying to persuade him. "Let me check it." "But you won't let me. You won't let me examine you. How can I find a solution for your situation?" Lin Xiao didn't look at the documents and said, "Dong, what? Didn't you say just now? The situation will be better after the child is born. Couldn't they just wait for the child to be born?" Jun Lin said. Lin Hao said, "You have to give me some data. What if someone else has the same situation as you in the future?" "You Dong," Jun said. Xiao said. Dong said. Lin will Dong Dong, Jun said. Dong 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 Tian. Lin said. Jun and Jun said. Hao and Hao said. Dong is Lin Jun. You have to find something to do when you have time. Do you think I don't know you? Lin Xiao sighed, leaned back on the chair and said, "All right, I got it. When I'm free, I'll go over there." As she spoke, she rubbed her belly, and a sweet feeling of fullness flashed across her heart. Lin Hao wrapped his arms around his chest and rubbed his chin. He looked at her with a contemplative expression and said, "Your situation doesn't seem to be dangerous for the time being, but I don't know how long it will last. All right, you should hurry back. The hospital is so busy. Do you still have time to waste here?" Lin Xiao looked at him and started to drive him away. "I'm busy, but I'm not the only doctor." Lin Hao shrugged and said, "No matter how serious their situation is, it's not as important as yours. You have time, but I don't. Don't disturb me here. Hurry up and leave." Lin Xiao raised his hand and waved at him, then sat up straight and began to read the documents. Lin Hao thought and said, "You haven't seen Leader Wu's daughter, right? I think it's better for you to see her when you have time, because her situation isn't looking good. I heard from Leader Wu that because of you, the child's condition improved a lot. Now that her illness is acting up again, she might be willing to approach you." Lin Xiao looked up and looked at him in confusion. "Lingling, the illness you're talking about?" Lin Hao nodded. "Yes, she's protecting herself again. No one is allowed to approach her except Leader Wu, and no one is allowed to enter her ward. Her situation is very bad. Lin Xiao sighed and asked. It's because Wu Qinghua went crazy before, right? Lin Hao nodded. Yes, that's right. Lin Xiao agreed. Okay. I will go and see her. Only then did Lin Hao stand up. He glanced at her and left thoughtfully. In fact, he had been studying a lot of methods for Lin Xiao's situation recently, but they were all useless. Fortunately, the child in her belly had been growing steadily, and nothing abnormal had happened. But as for Lin Xiao's situation, because she was the only example, he couldn't compare it with others. Lin Hao was still a bit uncertain. Seeing that Lin Hao had finally left, Lin Xiao was finally relieved. Thinking about Lingling's condition, she frowned. She thought that Lingling's condition was almost cured. She didn't think that she had underestimated Lingling's autism. Looks like I should find a time to visit Lingling. That night, when Lin Xiao returned to her place, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. Why aren't you staying at the hospital with Lingling? What are you doing here? The person she didn't want to see the most was this man. But he always came and went as he pleased. No matter what she said, it was useless. Shameless and domineering. Can you go and see her? Her condition isn't good. Wu Qinghua looked at her and said with a gloomy expression. Although Lingling's condition meant that he could come and find this female zombie openly, Lingling's condition really hurt him. Fortunately, Lingling's condition wasn't good, but it wasn't the worst. I know. I will find time to go and see her in the next 2 days. So do you have anything else? If not, then please go. The door is over there. I won't see you out. In the future, if you need anything, you can go to work and find me. Don't sneak into my house like a thief every day, okay? Lin Xiao looked at him with disdain. She walked to the tea table and poured herself a cup of water. She said. Chapter 9:11. Wu Qinghua stood up from the sofa and walked to Lin Xiao's side. He looked at her and said, Are you avoiding me? Although Lin Xiao's words seemed to drive him away, he was sensitive enough to notice that there was something different in her tone. Lin Xiao's eyelashes twitched and she took a step back. She raised her eyes and glanced at him, saying, Why should I avoid you? Leader Wu, are you thinking too much? She was still very unhappy with this man always invading her private territory. But she didn't know when it started. But she didn't feel the rejection from before. Her feelings towards Wu Qinghua had changed too much in the past 2 days, making her more and more uneasy. It was as if she was used to him appearing around her at any time. This habit was like a virus that invaded her divine essence system and gradually gained her approval. And now, as long as Wu Qinghua's breath approached her, she would feel a sense of danger, as if she was being watched by a hunter. They were both hunters before, but now she had a dangerous feeling that she had become the prey. Is that so? Then why are you retreating? Actually, you have begun to accept me in your heart, haven't you? Why are you so stubborn? Wu Qinghua sighed and smiled with a hint of pride and bitterness. Her heart had begun to accept him bit by bit, but her rationality was controlling her mind. This woman was too rational, not allowing even the slightest gap in her heart. Although he was now in the position of the hunter, from the moment he was tempted, he had already become the prey under her claws. In the world of love, whoever falls in love first loses. Most of this statement is true. Lin Xiao directly walked past him and headed for the balcony. Maybe you misunderstood. I didn't, she said lightly. Wu Qinghua followed behind and said helplessly, What do I have to do for you to accept me? You don't like that kid Lin Hao at all. He finally figured out that the brat was acting in front of her. Although the two seemed intimate, he keenly felt that there was some tacit understanding between the two of them. It didn't seem like they were lovers. They were like good brothers and sisters or old friends. Anyway, it didn't seem like they were lovers. Lin Xiao's eyes flashed. She leaned against the railing and looked at everything hidden in the darkness outside. Then why do you want me to accept you? I don't want to break up my current life, she said with a distant gaze. Wu Qinghua walked to her side and put away the helplessness in his eyes. Because you have to be responsible for me. Let's not talk about the first time. I didn't do it willingly the second time. Besides, the baby is mine. If I don't keep an eye on you, how am I going to find you if you run off with the ball one day? Xiao Lin was speechless. She was suddenly speechless. She really wanted to grab the original owner of this body and give her a good beating. Why did she have to be responsible for such a mess? As for the second time, well, it could be said that she didn't discipline little Man properly, causing such a thing to happen. As a parent, she indeed had to take responsibility. Just thinking about it made him feel tired. Lin Xiao couldn't help but think as she turned to look at Wu Qingyue's smirking handsome face. Why did the heavens allow her to be reborn? Was it to make this man cling to her? She thought for a moment and tried to dispel his thoughts by telling him about the past. The things I did in the past. You can accept them? You actually like a woman like me? You actually have better choices. There are many beautiful women in High City, right? There are many clean and beautiful women. Why do you have to waste time on me? Mengyu, Mo Li, and a female space ability user whose name she forgot were all beautiful women. Was this person blind? Why did he like Lu Tianyu, a woman who could sleep with anyone? Wu Qingyue's eyes deepened, and he smiled faintly. Everyone has to be responsible for the consequences of their own actions, no matter what kind of person you used to be. I don't care, I just want the current you. At first, he did feel a little uncomfortable with this female zombie's past, but as time went on, she revealed another nature after becoming a zombie, and she didn't know that her body had been reshaped. Under these factors, he gradually let go of the woman's past. Besides, he liked the current her, not the Lu Tianyu of the past. The past was the past, and he wouldn't pursue it. What's more, he hadn't even gotten her yet. What right did he have to dislike her past? Lin Xiao heard his somewhat paranoid words, and her head hurt. Resisting the urge to cover her forehead, she frowned and said, "Do you still have any principles? What kind of taste did this person have?" He actually liked Lu Tianyu's heavy taste. Lin Xiao still didn't know that her body had long been purified and reorganized. She thought that this body still carried the traces left by various men. Wu Qingyue suddenly reached out and hooked her chin, and Lin Xiao tilted her head to avoid it. In the next second, Wu Qingyue's two hands pressed on her shoulders. He leaned over, turned around, and pressed her against the railing of the balcony. The fake smile on his face disappeared, and it was a little dark under the cover of the night. But there was a burning light in his eyes, and he said to her, "My principle is that the person who has had this kind of relationship with me is my wife. So what's wrong with me chasing after my own wife?" As he spoke, he raised a hand and pinched her chin again. His thumb rose slightly and stroked her lips. The soft and elastic touch under his fingertips made Wu Qingyue enjoy it and feel nostalgic. "TSK, what kind of concept is this? It's the end of the world now. And it's not like the feudal society of ancient times, where you can marry a girl just by looking at her body." Lin Xiao rolled her eyes and raised her hand to slap away the hand that was harassing her lips. This bastard dared to tease her. "Just talk, can't you stop touching?" Wu Qingyue stared at her lips, and his eyes darkened. His hands were still on her shoulders, and he said, "No matter what, I'm already yours. Don't even think about leaving me to find another man in this life. You're also mine, no one else can think about it." Although he was on top of Lin Xiao, he wasn't really pressed down. The two of them faced each other, and he could feel the bulge on the female zombie's stomach. Lin Xiao pushed him away, looked at him and said, "Enough, you should worry more about Ling Ling now." Then she walked around him and went into the house. Then with a bang she closed the balcony door. Chapter 9:12. Lin Xiao no longer trusted love. She used to treat Yang Jianhua like a good friend. At that time, she saw him as her savior, so she would rather take care of him like a younger brother. Therefore, when Yang Jianhua attacked her at that time, she always avoided and did not answer. Before the age of 30, which was before the apocalypse, she had experienced 2 relationships. Both ended with the death of another person, and one of them betrayed her. The first was that her lover actually loved her too, but he was an international spy. In the end, he chose to betray her for his own benefit. She ended his life with her own hands to prevent the country's intelligence from being leaked. After being sad for a while, she recovered quickly. Even though her willpower had sunk a lot, she was still the nimble captain of Hades. The second lover died under her gun. Because the mission went wrong, they were both captured by the enemy. The enemy tortured their teammates to death. When they found out that they were lovers, they gave each of them a gun, forcing her and the person who loved her to shoot each other at the same time. One of them had to die. At that time, she would rather die than shoot. However, the man reached out to grab her gun and pulled the trigger in her panic and despair. Then, her reinforcements appeared and rushed in to attack the enemy. However, she could only hold on to the man's body in a daze, unable to move. Later on, she gradually closed her heart. These two relationships were unforgettable. She could no longer believe in love, nor did she dare to touch it. Yuan Tianqing and Yang Jianhua, no matter if they were sincere or not, she would not respond. She just didn't expect Yang Jianhua to attack her behind her back. So no matter how Wu Qingyue pestered her, she thought that she would not let go of her heart. However, during this period of time, she seemed to be getting more and more used to his persistence. This was not a good sign. Even when Yang Jianhua pestered her in the past, it was not like this. At that time, she could clearly maintain a safe distance from Yang Jianhua. Now she was doing the same with Wu Qingyue. However, the distance between them was slowly shortening without her noticing. Besides, Wu Qingyue's motive for pursuing him in the first place wasn't pure. Even from her point of view, she could understand that he was doing this for Lingling. But she wouldn't accept him just because she understood. Even if he had gradually fallen in love with her, she did not want to develop that kind of relationship with him. How nice would it be to be alone? She could live a carefree and unfettered life. Anyway, even if it was her family, they wouldn't be able to control her. Lin Xiao didn't want to admit it. She just didn't want to experience the pain and despair of seeing the man she loved die in front of her. Even if Wu Qingyue was very strong now, in this post-apocalyptic world, his current strength was nothing in the face of unknown dangers. No matter how strong a person was, he couldn't compare to a catastrophe. Outside the balcony, Wu Qingyue just smiled faintly after seeing the door close. Instead of entering the house, he disappeared from the balcony in a flash. The next day, Lin Xiao was busy from morning to night again. He only took time to go to the hospital at night. Lin Hao checked her from head to toe, and found that although the child in her stomach did not have a heartbeat, it was full of vitality. Ah, she moved. I saw her move a little. Lin Hao suddenly called out to the display screen in surprise. Lin Xiao was lying on the machine, and because of the angle, she couldn't see the display screen. But when she heard Lin Hao's voice, she smiled in her heart. Your reaction makes others think that it's your son. She smiled. Lin Hao's face darkened, and he glared at her unhappily. I'm her uncle. Do you know how to speak? Yes, you're her uncle. Is it still moving? Lin Xiao asked. Lin Hao stared at the screen for a while, and said with some disappointment, It's not moving again. It just moved its feet. Then can I get up? Although Lin Xiao said that, her body had already sat up. Lin Hao glanced at her. Yes. After saying that, he looked back at the image that had just been scanned, and looked at the baby that had shrunk into a ball. It looks like a normal 4.5-month-old fetus, but yours has already been pregnant for 7 or 8 months. It seems that if we want to wait for her to come out at this speed, it will probably take another winter. As he said that, he swept his gaze over Lin Xiao's abdomen. This child was growing too slowly. Lin Xiao touched the bump on her abdomen that was clearly bulging like a small belly, and said with a smile, It doesn't matter if it's slow, as long as she can grow up safely. I can wait no matter how slow it is. But after a while, it's not suitable for me to show my face in front of everyone. Lin Hao looked at her abdomen, and the skirt was already somewhat unable to cover it. It looked like she had gained some weight. You can say that you've gained weight. Haha, I'm just kidding. But according to her current growth speed, you should be able to hold on for a while. Lin Hao originally wanted to make a joke, but after receiving the dagger eyes thrown at him by his old sister, he immediately changed his words. Today, Duanwan started to ask me if I've gained weight. She even strangely asked if zombies can also gain weight from eating. Lin Xiao said helplessly. Today, when Duanwan looked at her abdomen in confusion and asked this question, she didn't know how to answer. She could only reply with 3 words. Maybe. The rest of the question mark was left to Duan Wan to guess. After coming out from Lin Hao's place, Lin Xiao took Duan Wan, who was waiting outside, to Wu Yueling's ward. Outside the door, Xiao Liqing sat on a chair beside the corridor. After seeing Lin Xiao appear, he immediately stood up. "Miss Liu." Lin Xiao nodded to him and looked at the closed door of the ward. "Your leader is inside?" Xiao Liqing nodded. Lin Xiao continued to ask, "How is Lingling's situation?" Xiao Liqing said, "When there's no one around, she wraps herself in a blanket and sits on the bed. Only when the leader goes in will she show her face. If it's someone else who goes in, she will quickly roll off the bed and crawl under the bed." For autistic people, the smaller the space, the safer they felt. It's like an animal's instinct. Fortunately, she can still let her father get close to her. At least it won't be that bad. Lin Xiao walked to the window and looked into the ward. Xiao Liqing sighed and said, "In any case, she was raised by the leader, so naturally she is more dependent on him." In the room, Wu Yueling was very sensitive. As soon as Lin Xiao stood by the window, she immediately noticed. She subconsciously shrank into the blanket and then looked at the window with vigilance. However, after seeing Lin Xiao's face, her expression was slightly stunned. Chapter 913. Seeing Lingling's reaction, Wu Qingyue, who was feeding her, also looked back at the window. He saw Lin Xiao standing at the door and smiling at Lingling. Wu Qingyue immediately looked back at Lingling's reaction and saw that Lingling didn't move. He was overjoyed and turned to look at Lin Xiao outside the window. Lin Xiao was also observing Wu Yueling's reaction and found that Wu Yueling's eyes narrowed slightly. She immediately turned her head away and looked somewhere else. The two were only a few meters apart, so Lin Xiao could feel Lingling's thoughts. She didn't feel that Lingling was as close to her as before, but she didn't seem to be afraid of her. Lin Xiao looked around the room and saw a straw doll and a big gray fur ball on the bed. It must have smelled Lin Xiao's scent. As soon as Lin Xiao looked at the gray fur ball, it immediately jumped off the bed and ran toward the door. The gray-furred ball's movements were very fast. In a flash, it had already disappeared from its original position, leaving behind a gray shadow. Seeing the gray fur ball run down, Wu Yueling's expression immediately changed. She looked at the door in panic, and then looked at the window anxiously. She liked Gray very much, but she also knew that Gray was not hers. Gray was a zombie mama, so no matter how much she liked it, it was not hers. Wu Yueling was a smart child, so she could understand everything that Wu Qingyue said to her. Naturally, she also knew that her things were her things, and other people's things were other people's things. She couldn't take things casually, so even though Gray had always been with her, she also knew that Gray was not hers. So now that she saw Gray run away, she wouldn't be like other children who would be overbearing and possessive of it. It was just that he was a little reluctant and unhappy in his heart. It was like a good friend was about to leave her. Wu Qingyue looked at Lingling's sad eyes and asked with a smile, "Lingling, do you want your zombie mama to come in? If she comes in, Big Fatty won't run away." Wu Yueling's eyes lit up. She looked at Wu Qingyue and hesitated, but she didn't immediately agree. Wu Qingyue looked at her encouragingly and didn't rush her. After watching for a while, Wu Qingyue stood up tentatively, put the bowl in his hand on the table next to him, and slowly walked toward the door while looking at her. Seeing that his action of walking to the door did not cause Wu Yueling to show any other strong reaction, Wu Qingyue's heart was slightly relieved. He opened the door, and the gray rabbit immediately jumped out. It turned left and lay on Lin Xiao's bare feet. It was like a big ball of fur was stuck to it. Lin Xiao was a little speechless as he looked down at the big rabbit that he hadn't seen in a long time. Wasn't he afraid of being skinned and eaten by her? He kept jumping in front of her. After taking a glance at his feet, Lin Xiao walked into the house. The gray rabbit naturally followed by her feet, not more than 10 centimeters away. After seeing Lin Xiao come in, Wu Yueling instinctively shrank back. But when she saw Lin Xiao closing the door behind him, she stopped. Lin Xiao didn't approach her. Instead, he stood not far from the door and bent down to pick up the fatso. This rabbit was very heavy, Lin Xiao had picked it up in July and August last year to use it as a reserve. He didn't expect to keep it until now. Moreover, it was fat, and it was also very agile. Of course, because of its mutation, its size was also much bigger than a normal rabbit. It weighed at least 20 kilograms in her hands. A whole big fat rabbit. It's fat. Lingling, what did you feed it? Lin Xiao weighed the weight in her hands and rubbed the back of the big fat rabbit with one hand. There was a furry feeling in his palm. Sure enough, Lingling's gaze was quickly moved to the big fat rabbit. In fact, it was already a good sign that Lin Xiao could enter the house, and Lingling could still sit quietly by the bed. Lin Xiao felt that if little Man came out at this time, it would be much better than her. Perhaps it would be much better than her, because she didn't know how to coax a child. Little Man was very good at this. She carried the gray rabbit, and slowly walked to the end of Lingling's bed. Then she put the big fat rabbit on the bed. She took out 2 fresh leaves from her space and fed it. The big fat rabbit immediately hugged the vegetable leaves and began to chomp on it. Seeing the gray rabbit eat, Wu Yueling's attention was also diverted. Outside the house, Duan Wan and Xiao Liqing quietly leaned on the glass window and looked into the house. Seeing Lin Xiao enter, Wu Yueling didn't react much. They both breathed a sigh of relief. Then, they looked at each other and moved away from the window. Lingling actually accepted Miss Lu's existence. She really likes Miss Lu. Xiao Liqing sat on a chair in the hallway. He didn't know what Miss Lu did to Lingling when she took her away. She made Lingling so close to her. Much closer than Mingyu, who was always by Lingling's side. Duan Wan crossed her arms in front of her chest and leaned against the wall. She looked down at him and didn't say a word. At this time, Lin Hao walked over from afar. He looked at the 2 people sitting and standing at the door. He walked to the glass window and looked in. The atmosphere inside was not bad. He looked back at the 2 people outside the door and said, "It seems that Lingling is only willing to let these 2 people in. I don't know if the leader has a way to let Lingling out." Duan Wan looked at him in confusion. "Let Lingling out? She won't come out?" Lin Hao nodded. "We have to find a way to let her leave the hospital and go home. Even if Leader Wu carries her out, it won't work. Once she leaves this room, her emotions will be very agitated. Then why don't we just carry her out when she's asleep?" Duan Wan said in confusion. Lin Hao shook his head. "That won't work either. If she wakes up and finds herself in another place, it will arouse the unknown fear in her heart. This will only worsen her condition. The best way is to carry her out when she's awake, and let her go through the acceptance process." Duan Wan finally understood. "I see. That's really troublesome." After saying that, she turned her head and looked inside the glass window. Lin Hao shrugged and said, "Yeah, mental illness is very troublesome. If she's not careful, she will be stimulated by various external factors, and it will act up." The other 2 nodded in agreement. Actually, it would be very suitable for Miss Lu to be Lingling's mother. It's a pity that our leader hasn't caught up with her yet, Xiao Liqing suddenly said with some pity. Lin Hao and Duan Wan's eyes darkened, and they fell silent at the same time. The 2 of them knew Lin Xiao's past very well, especially Duan Wan, who used to be in the same team. Actually, the 2 of them could see that the atmosphere between the 2 of them was different from before. But thinking of Lin Xiao's past, even if she was really moved, she wouldn't let herself go so easily. Chapter 9:14. It's not that easy to catch up to our leader. If Leader Wu doesn't have 10 times the patience of an ordinary person, there's no hope, Duan Wan suddenly said. Her words revealed something else. Xiao Liqing heard it, and looked at Duan Wan curiously. It seemed that Miss Lu had some other secrets? Why did she need someone to spend 10 times the patience? But how did Duan Wan know so much? She seemed to be very familiar with Miss Lu, but the 2 of them didn't seem to know each other before. Did she know some secret that even he couldn't find out? Xiao Liqing frowned slightly and asked, "Why do you say that?" Miss Lu didn't seem to have any deep emotional wounds in the past. She was always, in the past, I couldn't tell which man she had truly fallen in love with. Only people who were emotionally wounded would close their hearts. What Duan meant just now was that she needed 10 times the patience to move the other party, unless the other party had suffered a deep emotional wound. According to the information he had found, although Lu Tianyu had been moving between men in the past, she did it for the sake of survival. He didn't seem to have heard of her really falling in love with any man. Anyway, once she had a new target, she would quickly leave the original man's side. Duan glanced at him disdainfully and said, "Is Miss Lu still the same as before? Who doesn't have an unknown past?" Xiao Liqing was speechless. Miss Lu was only 24 years old this year. Even before the apocalypse, she was only 18 or 19 years old, the age when she had just entered university. He had also looked into it. There wasn't much information about Lu Tianyu before the apocalypse. Maybe it happened before the apocalypse? So she was underage at that time? The puppy love at that time shouldn't be that deep, right? Although he didn't understand Duan's words, Xiao Liqing didn't say anything. After all, Duan was now Miss Lu's assistant, so it was normal for her to know more than he did. But what Duan was thinking was that even Yuan Tianqing had given up. Who else could be more patient than Yuan Tianqing? It was true that Wu Qingyue looked very domineering and persistent, but Duan didn't know how long Wu Qingyue could last, and he didn't know what her boss was thinking. Actually, Duan was in favor of Wu Qingyue being able to woo Lin Xiao. At the very least, she could tell that the current leader Wu was somewhat sincere. Although his purpose was somewhat impure in the beginning, he didn't intend to hurt Lin Xiao. Moreover, Wu Qingyue had also openly stated his intentions. In fact, if one thought about it carefully, there was less deception. It was just that Lin Xiao's heart was resisting Wu Qingyue's approach, so he ignored it. Well, that's between the two of them. No matter who lost first, they wouldn't lose anything. Besides, they didn't have that much time to deal with these things. I heard that the people from Wuxia and the other bases are about to arrive at High City. Is your leader not going to return to Sea City? At this moment, Lin Hao suddenly waved his hand and said indifferently. Xiao Liqing looked at him and suddenly thought of something, his gaze a little strange. This person seemed to be their leader's rival in love? Did he seem to be speaking up for his leader? Did he misunderstand something? Duan nodded and looked into the ward. She suddenly realized something and said, "So we have to get Lingling out of the room as soon as possible? Looks like we can't leave her here alone." Lin Hao nodded and said, "That's right. That's why I asked our leader to try and see if he can make Lingling's condition better. I estimate that those people should arrive at High City by tomorrow afternoon. So our leader has to return to the base at the latest when those people have just arrived at High City." Xiao Liqing nodded and said. Just as Wu Qingyue was thinking about how to coax his daughter out of the ward, and Lin Xiao was thinking about quickly driving this person back to High City to help him coax the child. Far away in Nyambo City, there was a group of corpse hunters climbing out of a collapsed hole in the ground in a sorry state. One of the tall women was lying on the edge of the hole, one hand holding a protrusion in front of her to stabilize her body. Then she turned around and reached behind her. She didn't say anything, but the people behind her had already reached out to grab her hand and used it to climb out. After a while, 7 or 8 people climbed out with their faces covered in dirt. They stood beside the hole and silently looked at the huge hole in front of them that had caved in for more than 10 meters. At the bottom of the hole, there was the wreckage of a building lying horizontally across the huge hole. Qinyu squatted down. Her face was a little pale, and there was pain and sorrow in her eyes. "Let's go. We'll bring the situation here back to the base first. Those things underground are not something we can deal with. If they run to the surface, we can't do anything." A man stood beside Qinyu and said in a somewhat defeated tone. His eyes were red, but he could only grit his teeth and endure. Every time they went out of the base to hunt, everyone was struggling on the line of life and death. So when a teammate died or encountered an accident, they could only quickly adjust their mentality. Otherwise, if they panicked, it would affect their strength and judgment. At that time, they would be in danger. This time they came out with a total of more than 20 people. But at this moment, they were standing here alive. However, there were only 7 or 8 people left. The building in the hole was blown down by them, in order to block the hole. Around the hole, There were no traces of zombies. Logically, this was the center of a town and a densely populated place. It was impossible for there to be no zombies. But when they came here, they found this strange phenomenon and felt that it was very strange. Finally, they found a strange hole. This hole seemed to have suddenly caved in, and they didn't know what was down there. When the corpse hunting team saw this kind of unknown situation, they would usually carefully go down to investigate, and then bring this information back to the base to hand it over to the base, which could be exchanged for things like contribution points. So Qin Yu and the others went down, and after going down, they found that there were some strange tunnels underground. The deeper they went, the more tunnels there were. It felt like a mouse hole, but it was much bigger than a mouse hole. At least an adult could walk in the tunnel standing up. As they walked, it didn't take long for them to encounter some strange creatures in the dark underground. These creatures were very aggressive, and their bodies were wrapped in a very hard layer of keratin. They were very fast. When they rushed out, the naked eye couldn't see the other party's figure. But as soon as these creatures appeared, their teammates were immediately bitten and quickly dragged away, leaving only a burst of screams from near to far before disappearing. Chapter 9:15. It only took Lin Xiao 2 hours to carry Wu Yueling out of the hospital. After entering the ward, she stood at the end of the bed and didn't go near Wu Yueling. However, the fat rabbit she put on the bed refused to go to Wu Yueling. Instead, it jumped off the bed and continued to lie on Lin Xiao's foot. Wu Yueling turned her head and stared at the big rabbit on Lin Xiao's foot. From time to time, she looked up at Lin Xiao. Seeing that Lin Xiao wasn't going to put the big rabbit on the bed, she suddenly slid off the bed. She put on her little shoes and walked towards Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao bent down to pick up the rabbit, but he didn't want to give it to her. Instead, he said to her, "Your dad is going home tomorrow. Lingling, be a good girl and go home with dad, okay? If you go home with your dad tomorrow, I will give this fat rabbit to you. It will be your rabbit from now on, okay?" Hearing that Lin Xiao was going to give the rabbit to her, Wu Yueling's eyes lit up. However, thinking about leaving this place, she was a little unhappy. She stared at the rabbit for a while, then turned to look at Wu Qingyue. It seemed like she was asking for his opinion. Wu Qingyue smiled and stood up. He nodded and said, "Dad is going home tomorrow. Lingling is going home too. We've been here for a long time. It's time to go home." So Lin Xiao let Wu Yueling hold the rabbit and carried Wu Yueling himself. Then he carried her out of the room. Wu Yueling immediately hugged the big rabbit tightly after leaving the room. She subconsciously buried her face in Lin Xiao's neck. Her eyes were closed, and she still looked very scared. Lin Xiao glanced at the others and patted Wu Yueling's back gently to give her a sense of security. Then he walked out. After Wu Qingyue packed Wu Yueling's things inside, he followed them out. Knowing Wu Yueling's situation, Duan Wan and Xiao Li distanced themselves from her, not daring to get too close. Lin Hao walked on the other side of Lin Xiao at a moderate distance. "You're much more useful than her dad," Lin Hao said as he glanced at Wu Qingyue, his eyes full of contempt. Wu Qingyue was speechless. He was speechless. He glanced at Lin Hao with a darkened face, only to see that he had already turned his head away. After leaving the hospital, Lin Xiao returned Wu Yueling to Wu Qingyue and coaxed her. "Good girl, listen to me. When I'm free, I'll go visit Lingling." Only then did Wu Yueling get into her father's car with the bunny in her arms. The next day, Wu Qingyue finally left with his men. When Lin Xiao heard Xin Yuzhen's report, he heaved a sigh of relief. After Lin Xiao, Yuan Tianxing and Lin Feng had a meeting. Lin Feng received a message from his subordinate Qian Xiaowai. A strange underground cave was discovered in Nianbo City. There were strange creatures living in the cave. The attack power and speed of these creatures were very strong. More importantly, these creatures were not land-mutated animals. No one knew what they were. These creatures were also very large. According to our understanding, they were about 1 to 2 meters long, had 4 limbs and abnormally sharp claws. This team originally had 28 people. But after they went down, they were attacked by these creatures. Very quickly, 20 people were killed. The few that escaped were the stronger ones. The weaker ones were dragged away by those strange creatures. Qian Xiao, I said. Lin Feng took the records from him and frowned in silence. Also, they said that there are many of these creatures. The underground cave is very long, and it seems that the area is not small. They didn't find out the actual situation. If we were to send people, we can't send people that are too weak. Otherwise, they won't be able to return. Qian Xiaoai's expression darkened. However, he didn't say anything else. His job was to pass the information to Lin Feng. He couldn't care about anything else. I'll go talk to the leader. Lin Feng nodded. Although the location of the information wasn't near them, it wasn't very far either. It was also in the direction that the corpse hunters and the others often went. For the safety of the people in the base, it was better to find out about these abnormal situations. Not long after Lin Xiao returned to the office in the second base, Duan Wan said that Lin Feng came to look for her. What's wrong? What's the matter? He didn't say anything during the meeting just now, but now he followed her to the second base. Lin Feng walked in and handed her the information he had just received. I just received this. I think it's not that simple. I want to go and see the situation. What's not simple? Lin Xiao took the records from him in a daze and looked down curiously. It's a new species and it's active underground. I don't know if it will crawl onto land. These things are very strange, and there are many of them. I want to see if they will come out, and if they will cause any damage to our base. Lin Feng sat up straight with a serious expression on his face. The unknown was always the most dangerous. If there was a huge danger hidden in these things, then they had to at least be mentally prepared. If they didn't threaten their base, that would be even better, and they could feel more at ease. Lin Xiao finished reading the information and nodded. Okay, but you don't need to bring ordinary people and metahumans below rank 3. Pick a few who are good at survival skills. I'll let Asan and Asi bring 5 rank 5 leaders to go with you, she said to Shen Yuzhen, who was by the door. Yuzhen, call Asan and Asi over. Yes. Shen Yuzhen nodded and went out. After a while, she walked in with an uncle and a child wearing a mask. Lin Feng had seen these two before. Although he knew that they were zombies, they were already half awake. Lin Xiao nodded slightly to them as a greeting. Asan and Asi looked at Lin Feng in silence. Asan nodded his head in response. Asi only glanced at Lin Feng and took it as a response. There's a mission. The two of you will bring 5 long-range attack-type leaders and work together with them. But be careful not to reveal your identities. Lin Xiao looked at the two of them and said. Originally, she wanted them to follow behind Lin Feng and the others and secretly protect them. But when she thought about the possibility of entering the underground tunnel to investigate, it was safer to walk together. Asan and Asi looked at Lin Feng at the same time, then turned to look at Lin Xiao and nodded. Lin Xiao looked at the information in his hand, and for some reason, he thought about the outbreak of the rats. There was also the second virus outbreak. He didn't know if these creatures had anything to do with the second virus outbreak. Chapter 9:16. Your mission this time is to gather intelligence and observe the danger level of these creatures. You need to ensure your own safety first. If you encounter an unstoppable situation, get out as soon as possible. Lin Xiao looked at the three of them and requested. Lin Feng nodded, he understood what she meant. Although Asan and Asi were level 6 zombies, they had recovered their memories. Their abilities and IQ were higher than ordinary people. Naturally, they understood what Lin Xiao meant. The first was to observe the characteristics of these creatures. The danger level referred to the danger level to humans, or whether they could harm the base. That's it for now. Lin Xiao asked them to leave, then crossed her arms in thought. She suddenly realized that she didn't have enough zombies to send out. There weren't many level 1st kings. Now that there were crazy mutant beasts and mutant plants everywhere, the fighting power of these things had increased by 1 or 2 levels. And it seemed like they were evolving very quickly. There were level 5 and 6 mutant beasts everywhere. For level 6 zombies, encountering a level 6 mutant beast wasn't a good thing. Lin Xiao now had 3 level 2 zombies and 11 level 1 zombies beside her. Half of them had to stay in the base to guard, and the other half had to be sent out. They hadn't even figured out the situation with the rats. And now these underground creatures had come out. There were also a bunch of mutant beasts, mutant plants, mutant bugs, etc. But the humans in the base still had to go out and collect resources. So they had to face these dangerous situations. A few days later, Lu Jun came over with the base's report and asked her, "The seeds outside have been used up. Can you take out a batch of seeds from your space? How's Lu Tianyi doing?" Lin Xiao nodded and said, "He opened up all the land around the lake, and the strawberry field has expanded quite a bit." "So big, how many people did you give him?" Lu Jun thought about it. Lin Xiao's land was quite big. If they were all opened up, Lu Tianyi, Xiao Xiao, and Jungler wouldn't be enough. Anyway, all of them are helping out. There should be about 20 of them. Lin Xiao said. Even Mo Yin had nothing to do, so he brought the female zombie down to play. He was really playing. In the beginning, it was very slow, teaching the female zombie in the white dress how to loosen the soil, how to plant seeds, how to fill the soil watering and so on. Later, it was discovered that these seeds had only been in the soil for one night. After more than 10 hours, they had sprouted out of the soil. They were green and tender sprouts, full of vitality. This caused Mo Yin to feel an inexplicable sense of accomplishment. He was the one who planted them. Just like that, the level 8 zombie emperor suddenly fell in love with farming. Every day, he would watch these sprouts change, watch them grow into all kinds of things. Seeing that the vegetables he had planted with his own hands were growing beautifully, the more beautiful they were, the happier he felt. When he was in a good mood, he would even pick 1 or 2 leaves and chew them in his mouth. He didn't know what it would taste like. At first, Mrs. Lin just stands by the vegetable field and looks at it blankly. After a while she learns to do it. In any case, the zombies in Lin Xiao's space have nothing to do and are busy in the vegetable field. Every day, Lu Tianyi will put the harvested vegetables and melons in some boxes, and then put them in the open space in front of the small building. Lin Xiao can take out the melons and vegetables with a wave of her hand, and then ask Lu Jun to send them to Cheng Wangxue. But the ones that Lin Xiao takes out from her space are not placed together with the ones in the cultivation base. Because the quality in her space is very high, it also has a very light and gentle energy. Eating a lot of it is good for the human body. So these are all provided to the high-level people, and also to other people. But the price is higher, so ordinary people can't afford it. Lin Xiao suddenly smelled Lu Jun and asked, "What do you think of Xiedong?" Lu Jun looked at her in confusion. He didn't understand why she suddenly talked about Xiedong. "Ah!" Lin Xiao insisted and asked again. "That is, what do you think of Xiedong?" Lu Jun pondered for a while and said, "Well, not bad. Although he doesn't like to talk, he gives people a strong sense of security." "Oh really?" Lin Xiao suddenly smiled, and said with a playful look, "Why do you smell like Xiedong more and more recently? You two have been very close recently. These two people have a JQ." Lu Jun's expression was stunned, and then she smelled her arm strangely. "Really? Why can't I smell it?" Lin Xiao rolled her eyes and said, "You can't smell it. You are used to it." Lu Jun looked up at her blankly. "What do you mean used to it? He saved Tong Tong last time. I am very grateful to him." "That's it." Lin Xiao wanted to roll her eyes. It seems that this guy hasn't noticed. She just didn't know what was going on with Xiedong. Was it what she thought? Lin Xiao looked at Lu Jun, thinking about her relationship with Xiedong. Her eyes slightly flashed with curiosity. But she was just curious. She didn't plan to interfere with these two people. If the two of them can be together, it is actually not bad. Although Lu Jun has a son, she is also a good woman. Xiedong is an honest person. If he can let go of his previous girlfriend, it is also not bad. Lu Jun looked at her strangely. "Then what else do you want?" Lin Xiao stared at her with shining eyes. This female zombie previously always used her, and Wu Qingyue to poke at her. Now she can give her a taste of her own medicine. "I think old Xie is very good. Do you want to think about it? It is also good to find a father to protect Tong Tong. After all, you are so busy every day." Lin Xiao looked at her and said. Lu Jun looked at her speechlessly. "Xiedong is even busier than me. At least I still work in the base. He has to run out every 2 to 3 days. Xiedong is in the intelligence field. It is normal for him to go out frequently. Lin Xiao rubbed her chin and said, "This is only for now. In the future, he will train all his subordinates. When there are enough people, he won't have to run out so often after he is promoted." In fact, recently Xiedong rarely ran out. Even so, it is also if he is willing. I don't feel that he has this intention, Lu Jun said casually. It seems that she didn't want to think in this direction. In her impression, Xiedong behaved very normally, as if he didn't have any other intention. But the probability of them accidentally meeting each other these few days seems to be a bit high. Oh, Lin Xiao shrugged and didn't say anything more to her. Lu Jun looked at her strangely, then carried the box of seeds that Lin Xiao took out from the space and left her office. Chapter 917. Not long after Lu Jun left, Xiedong came in. Lin Xiao placed the documents on the table and looked at him. "You guys seem to have a good rapport recently. Why do you always come to my office on the same day?" Xiedong was stunned. He remained expressionless and didn't speak. He placed the documents on the table and looked at her in silence. Lin Xiao took the documents and flipped through them. "What's going on?" Xiedong said. Leader Wu managed to keep his whereabouts a secret when he returned, so the people from the Wuxia bases didn't know. They thought Leader Wu was going berserk outside and wasn't in Sea City, so he was very unyielding when negotiating. He wanted Sea City to hand over the results of the land purification, saying that it's a resource that benefits mankind and shouldn't be hidden by the people of Sea City. Lin Xiao skimmed through the documents, closed them, and tossed them onto the pile of unprocessed documents. "Are they trying to force us to sell? What are they going to give in exchange?" She placed her hands on the table and looked up. 50,000 sets of normal autumn and winter clothes, as well as personal care products like body wash and cleaners. Although the main equipment is provided, there aren't many of them. Xiedong reported the various figures and said, "That's not important. What's important are the people they sent secretly. They're going to sneak into Sea City to kidnap the scientists and get the information we want from them. So, the items being traded on the surface were just a cover. They're not stupid. They know to target the researchers. But I'm afraid they'll be disappointed. It's useless even if they kidnap them." Lin Xiao sneered and lowered her eyes. Xiedong looked at her and didn't reply. Lin Xiao asked, "So, did they kidnap the people in Sea City?" Actually, she was just asking casually. Wu Qinghua wouldn't let them have their way when he returned. He wasn't stupid. He wasn't the leader of a large base for nothing. No, those people didn't have a chance to sneak into Sea City. They were captured as suspicious people as soon as they entered. And the Wuxia people couldn't publicly acknowledge them. So they didn't do anything in the end, Xiedong said. Lin Xiao had already guessed the result. After hearing Xiedong, she changed the topic and asked curiously, "You and Lu Jun, what's going on? You like her?" Upon hearing Lin Xiao mention Lu Jun, Xiedong's reaction was the same as Lu Jun's. They all froze for a moment and raised their pitch-black eyes to look at Lin Xiao blankly. Lin Xiao was silent, but he looked at him with shining eyes, waiting for him to agree. Xiedong looked at her for a few seconds before looking away. His tough face was still pale, but Lin Xiao felt that the energy in his body seemed to be rushing to his face. Is this how zombies blush? But from the looks of it, there was a chance. However, he was a zombie, right? Although his heart could move, what about his body? I wonder if Xiedong's body can still be hard? Cough. It's not that I'm thinking too much. It's because zombies, their body parts are probably dead too. If they couldn't be forceful, then they could only be spiritual partners. Maybe this is not bad. Having someone to rely on is better than being alone. Seeing Lin Xiao's eyes flicker, he became curious. It was one thing for her to become strange, but why was she looking at his crotch? Xiedong's expressionless face was about to crack. His leader must be thinking of something strange. In order to prevent her gaze from becoming more strange, Xiedong quickly said, "I think it's a bit tiring for a woman to take care of a child." It was tiring enough for a woman without any ability to protect him. She also had to protect a child, and in the end, She was pushed out by a scumbag and bitten by a zombie. She had already become a zombie, but she still unconsciously protected her son. When Xiedong knew what happened to Lu Jun, a thought flashed through his mind. How good would it be if the woman he fell in love with was like Lu Jun? Later, gradually, every time he saw Lu Jun, Xiedong's memory of that woman became more and more faint. Although he never showed it on his face, he would always pay more attention to her. When Lin Xiao heard what he said, she could also sense the feelings he revealed. There seemed to be a faint sense of protection, as if he wanted to cover the two of them under his wings. Is that so? I can see that you are sincere. Congratulations on letting go of the past and accepting the future. You two can try to be the first. I'm curious if you have that kind of impulsive feeling towards her. When Lin Xiao was curious, she was also very blunt. The light in her eyes almost blinded Xiedong's eyes. Xiedong listened to her words, and then looked at her expression. He really wanted to cover his face. What should he do? Leader, did you forget that you are a woman? Don't you think it's weird to ask a man this kind of question? Well, I'm just curious. Haha. Okay, you can leave first. Lin Xiao saw that Xiedong's stiff expression was about to break into pieces, so she let him go and chased him out. Xiedong quickly left her office, as if he was escaping, as if there was a ghost chasing him from behind. I think it's not just me who is curious about this. Lin Hao, that kid is even more curious. Lin Xiao looked at Xiedong's back as he quickly left and muttered to herself. But thinking about the scene of the two of them together, it had to be said that the scene was quite beautiful. Xiedong was tall, and although his appearance couldn't be said to be handsome, he was still a handsome and tough man. He had a calm temperament and a strict personality. His character was also not bad. Even after experiencing a few betrayals, it didn't affect his nature. And Lu Jun was quite good-looking with a good figure. Even if she had a child, it wouldn't affect her. Other than being a little thin, her personality was also considered gentle and quiet. Being with Xiedong, the two of them shouldn't have any big problems. But looking at Lu Jun's reaction just now, it seemed that Xiedong's path was a bit difficult. After Xiedong, who Lin Xiao thought was a bit difficult, came out of the office, he smelled Lu Jun's remaining scent and followed. When he was talking to Lin Xiao about Lu Jun, Xiedong's heart had a trace of longing. He wanted to see the female zombie who was as gentle as water, but had a strong heart. So when Lu Jun returned to the small wooden house in the cultivation base, he smelled Xiedong's scent. Why are you here? What's the matter? Lu Jun looked curiously at Xiedong, who was in the open space outside the small wooden house. Usually when the two of them met, they would mostly be in the office building or the leader's office. This was the first time Xiedong came to the cultivation base. Xiedong looked around and said, "I'm here to see the situation here." After saying that, he subconsciously looked at the house behind Lu Jun. Lu Jun suddenly understood what he was looking at, and said with a smile, "Tong Tong usually stays at Wang Shui during the day, keeping Xiao Lu company. It's not convenient for him to come here for the time being. There were zombies all around. It wasn't safe for a living child to be here. Even if these zombies were trained, their self-control wasn't low." Chapter 9:18. After Xiedong left, Lin Xiao opened up the report he'd given him. It looked like the situation was still under Wu Qingyue's control. The people from China and other bases wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. In the reception hall, Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui were both present. Deputy Chief Mo Li, Old Man He Lukuan, and Xiao Liqing were also present. From China came Wei Haichao and Hou Guozhong. After the zombie wave, Hou Guozhong had been promoted from deputy chief to director. Aside from China, Sunfire Base's last chief Li Jingye, and his deputy chief Mo Quan, Black Dragon Base's chief Du Kuanqing, and Meng Clan's Bao Qingji. Only Green Mountain Base, which was just as new as Universal Base, didn't have anyone. Wei Haichao, sitting in the guest seat, looked at Xiao Yunlong and said with a smile, "I think the conditions we gave are not low. The autumn and winter clothes and quilts are all newly made by us. And the cotton for the quilts is also grown by us. Your base can't grow this kind of cotton tree, So you have no choice but to trade with us. How could Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui not understand the meaning of his words? But both of them looked at Wei Haichao without changing their expressions. They didn't take his words to heart. Every time they made a deal with China, both sides would talk back and forth, elevating themselves and belittling the other party in order to obtain greater benefits. We've prepared enough food and vegetables for the materials you've given us. As for the method to purify the soil, we can't give it to you. Zhou Shihui said softly. Even in the face of several 7th-level adepts from the other bases, he didn't back down. Then what do you want that you're willing to give? We're the only base in the country. Why don't we share the information that can save humanity? Do you want to wait until the survivors from other countries have their eyes on you before you hand it over? Li Jingye asked with a frown. His words implied that the people of Haiqing were selfish and disregarding the lives and deaths of others. Chief Li is right. I hear the Japanese are getting restless. The apocalypse has caused frequent earthquakes in their country, and all kinds of mutant beasts and plants have made it impossible for them to continue living there. It won't be long before they invade our territory. Wei Haichao echoed. As far as I know, it won't be that easy for them to land. The energy required for a plane was tens of times greater than that of a ship. Even if it was a ship, there would still be the threat of mutated sea beasts. If the Japanese wanted to migrate over, they would have to abandon a lot of people, and could not bring too many weapons. Then our land will not have much advantage. Xiao Yunlong expressionlessly reminded them. The underground environment of Japan was affected by the apocalypse. It was unknown if they were at the edge of the Earth's crust. When the apocalypse occurred, earthquakes and tsunamis occurred frequently. The living conditions of those people were much more difficult than those on land. However, it would be extremely dangerous for them to give up on the other side and cross the sea to the mainland, whether by boat or plane. Moreover, the plane did not have enough energy to fly so far. Wei Haichao and Li Jingye only wanted to use them to scare him, so that Sea City would feel threatened and have no choice but to cooperate with the other bases. In this way, the situation would be reversed, and Sea City would be the one asking for help. Xiao Yunlong and Zhou Shihui also knew that the real purpose of Wei Haichao and the others arguing with them here was not because the conditions of the two sides were not satisfactory. Although they kept saying that Sea City would hand over the soil purification technology, they were not willing to give enough conditions in exchange. The real purpose was just to delay time, so that the people in the dark could carry out the underground operation. Therefore, Wei Haichao and the others also expected that Sea City would not agree to the conditions of the transaction, because they obviously deliberately lowered the conditions. In any case, since the supplies you brought are not enough for the original transaction, then we have to reduce the weight of the food to the same price as the goods you are trading. Zhou Shihui was not in the mood to waste time with them. If Wu Qingwei did not have to hide and clean up the rats that secretly came to steal things, he would not be here to temporarily cover for him. He wanted to go back and study the quality of the soil. He wanted to study the planting of plants. And he wanted to grow food that could be eaten by humans. There were a lot of things waiting for him to do. Who wanted to talk nonsense with these people here? The transaction could still be carried out. So these people hurriedly took the food and went back. Don't even think about the soil purification technology anymore. Du Kuansheng, who had been silent all this time, watched with a gloomy face as Wei Haichao and Xiao Yunlong went back and forth, not intending to say anything. He was only here to help out. His deal with Xikongchen didn't say that he had to help Wei Haichao. All he needed to do was show up and show his support for Black Dragon. He just didn't expect to be here for a few days. The people that Wei Haichao brought secretly couldn't even enter the Sea City base, let alone whether the previous operation plan would succeed or not. Disdain flashed in his eyes. These people thought that Wu Qingwei had gone mad and couldn't take control of the situation, so he could suppress Sea City? The people from Sea City weren't stupid. Du Kuansheng thought about the recent changes in the situation and realized that Sea City had some hidden cards up their sleeves. Of the 8 major bases in the country, more than half had been toppled. Hades, Earth Dragon, and Hidden Cloud City only existed in name. 2 of Skyfire's leaders were missing, and China and Black Dragon had been besieged by the zombies. The Meng base hadn't suffered any losses, but they were the weakest of the 8. There weren't many survivors, resources were scarce, and the environment was harsh. Apart from that, only Sea City, the newly established Sentient Base, and Green Mountain Base were safe. Sentient Base was dependent on Sea City, so the city hadn't suffered any significant losses. It wasn't simple. Du Kuanqing felt that even if they wanted to be enemies with Sea City, they couldn't go too far. They had to leave some leeway. That was his intuition. On the other side, Wu Qingyue stayed in his little building and didn't show himself. But he knew the situation in Sea City like the back of his hand. Find out where they are, and find out how much firepower they have. If they've snuck in, then we'll make them disappear without a trace. Wu Qingyue sat at his desk, Wu Yueling in his arms. In Wu Yueling's arms was a big rabbit whose fur had been shaved. The weather was hot, and the rabbit's fur was too long. Being held by Wu Yueling all day was too hot, and it didn't want to be held any longer. So Wu Qingyue decided to shave off all the long fur. Wu Yueling looked at the shaved rabbit, conflicted. But there were outsiders in the study. She didn't show it. Chapter 919. Intelligence Minister Li Yushan stood 3 meters away from Wu Qingyue's desk and reported the situation. Because of Wu Yueling, he didn't dare to get too close. Their hiding place has been tracked, but the weapons are still not clear. Li Yushan said. This meant that they didn't get too close for fear of alerting the enemy. Therefore, they could only see the weapons in those people's hands and on their bodies. They didn't know if they had taken out anything else. After Wu Qingyue understood what he meant, he thought for a moment and nodded slightly. All right, I got it. You continue to keep an eye on them and report back if there's anything. Li Yushan immediately retreated. Yes. When only Wu Qingyue and his daughter were left in the study, Wu Yueling's body slightly relaxed. Although this was her home these days, she hadn't lived here for more than a month, and it really became a little strange. Wu Yueling was a little uncomfortable at first, so she let Wu Qingyue hold her. When a subordinate came to find Wu Qingyue, she would tense up, or find a place to hide. Wu Qingyue saw that she would either hide under the table, or behind the sofa every time, so he held her in his arms. This gave her a sense of security that was better than letting her hide under the table. Now that there was no one in the room, Wu Yueling naturally relaxed her guard. Wu Qingyue put her down from his arms and let her sit on the sofa. Take your little friend and sit on the sofa, okay? Dad has to work. So Wu Yueling took her little friend who had been shaved and sat down on the sofa, and then continued to look at the ugly rabbit. Wu Qingyue looked at Lingling and pondered. The time that Lingling could leave him was getting longer and longer. It seemed that he had to hurry up and let her get used to it as soon as possible. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to deal with those people outside. He was ready to deal with those people directly, considering that the other side were level 4 or 5 ability users, and there were even level 6 ability users with a large number of high-power weapons. Since he intended to make the other side disappear silently, then Wu Qingyue wouldn't send too many people out. So he planned to do it himself. Anyway, he also wanted to know how powerful the newly developed weapons of China were. Wei Haichao and the others calmly returned to their place after the negotiation with Xiao Yunlong, and Xiao Yunlong failed. This was already the umpteenth time. Anyway, no one was in a hurry, let's just wait. Did they discover our goal a long time ago? Otherwise, why couldn't our people sneak in? Ho Guozhong sat on the sofa and said with a hesitant expression, how is this possible? If they knew, would they still be wasting time with us? It was obviously disadvantageous to them. They should have just chased us away. Or he might as well just agree to the terms of the deal. Wei Haichao said disapprovingly. Are those people of yours not capable enough? Why couldn't he even sneak into their base? Why didn't you just bring him in? Why did you leave him outside the base? Li Jingye said disdainfully. Do you think they're blind to have brought so many people in? If I brazenly bring people in, then what about my weapons? Besides, if you bring them in openly, how are you going to cover it up if they aren't there to perform the mission? Looking at Li Jingye's contemptuous eyes, Ho Guozhong also didn't have a good tone with him. Did they think they didn't know Skyfire Base wanted them to suffer? Previously, when they were fighting against the zombie emperor and the zombie horde, they were clearly nearby, but they were unwilling to help. Fine, I won't help you then. In any case, China wasn't weak, and they had a base that wasn't too strong or too weak. What's going on? Haven't you found out? We need to think of a way. The people in Haiqing are running out of patience. Bao Qingji of the Ming clan spoke up, his face expressionless. Their original plan was to get a list of names and addresses of the people who were researching the purification technology. Then they'd find a small door on the wall that wasn't heavily guarded and let their people in. Every base had 4 main doors: east, west, south, and north, but there were countless smaller ones. With so many smaller doors, there were bound to be some that weren't heavily guarded. What they didn't expect, though they'd gotten a list of names, their people wouldn't be able to get in. Every door was heavily guarded, and if they tried to get in, they'd be searched. Once they were searched, they'd be exposed. If they were exposed, they'd have to fight, and the commotion wouldn't be small. That's why the people outside couldn't get in. After all, every base had a record of who went in and out, and it wouldn't be easy for them to sneak in. If they couldn't get in, they couldn't just climb over the wall, and that was even more impossible. There were guards on the wall as well. Why don't we use the second plan? Wei Haiqiao frowned, his eyes gloomy as he spoke. Everyone looked at him silently, but Du Kuanxing's eyes flashed with a sharp light. If the second plan is discovered, I don't think it'll be good for everyone. If Wu Qinghua suddenly wakes up one day and finds out that your bases have teamed up to lure zombies and mutant beasts to his base, wouldn't he go and destroy your bases? He was talking about you guys, but he didn't include himself. After all, he didn't agree to this plan at the time. Let's not talk about Wu Qinghua running off to who knows where. If we want him to wake up, we need someone to control him first. If no one can control him, how are we going to knock him out? Li Jingye smiled carelessly, then couldn't help but look at Du Kuanxing jokingly. I say, Du Kuanxing, why are you always so timid? No wonder you're always suppressed by Gao Haoyun. In any case, the other bases haven't researched the reason why psychics go berserk, let alone developing drugs to suppress them. The only way is to knock them out. Humph, I'm just being cautious. I'm timid, but I'm still alive. Du Kuanxing snorted coldly. Old Bao, what do you think? Do you want to use the second plan? Wei Haiqiao looked at Bao Qingji, who was silent. Bao Qingji shrugged and said, no. If that's the case, then I won't participate. But don't worry, I won't give them any information. Du Kuanxing immediately stood up, put on the black wide-brimmed military cap in his hand, turned around and walked out of the room. If it was just to secretly cause trouble in Haiqing, he wouldn't mind. But this kind of disregard for the safety of the other survivors in the base, and doing things without any means to achieve a goal, he disdained to do it. And on the other hand, offending the entire Haiqing base wasn't a good thing. The others silently watched him leave. Li Jingye looked at Wei Haiqiao in confusion. You let him go just like that? Are you really not afraid of him telling on us? Wei Haiqiao shook his head. No, he doesn't seem to want to offend Haiqing. But what he doesn't dare to offend is us, China. Don't dare to offend you? Haiqing didn't want to, but China didn't dare. Li Jingye couldn't figure out the reason. Because we're close. Literally, when did your IQ start to drop? At this time, Bao Qingji suddenly laughed and teased him. Chapter 920. Because the distance between China and the Black Dragon base was very close. If the Black Dragon base didn't want to be cut off, they couldn't become enemies with China. These were the problems that everyone understood. Du Kuanxing returned to his place with a gloomy face. His aura was cold and fierce. He said to his assistant, Go find Zhou Shihui in Haiqing. Tell him that the Black Dragon base wants to trade with Haiqing alone. Yes. The assistant immediately turned around and left. Du Kuanxing turned his face to look out the window. His originally handsome face had become gloomy ever since the Black Dragon base went through the zombie wave disaster. His aura had also become cold and sharp, making people feel cold just by looking at him. He was already prepared for this. If Wei Haichao and his group wanted to activate the second plan, he could only go to Haiqing himself to trade. He could only go and trade with Sea City himself. Since he was already here, he couldn't go back empty-handed. Although he didn't bring many things, he would trade what he could. If he couldn't, he would borrow a place in Haiqing to set up a stall for a while before going back. At this time, at the border of Su Province and Zhe Province, Lung Xiantong and a group of people were staying in a garden area by the lakeside. After finding a clean room in a building, everyone looked at the woman in the room, who had undergone a huge change with amazement. "Oh my God, don't just stand there. Help me pull her away. Ayo, she's crushing me." Lin Wenwen looked back and shouted helplessly at the crowd. Looking at her good friend who was stuck to her, she couldn't tear her off no matter how hard she tried. She was even stickier than an octopus. No, this wasn't much. The most important thing was that this guy was looking at her with hazy eyes, but his face kept moving closer to hers. He sniffed left and right, and wanted to kiss her. No, she didn't want to be a lesbian. "Sister, we don't want to date. Don't kiss her anymore." Lin Wenwen was exhausted from pushing her away. "Wenwen, who else besides you dares to hug her? What if she wakes up and sees us hugging her? She's going to cut us with a knife." Lung Xiantong joked, but he crossed his arms and leaned against the window without moving. The others were either squatting, standing, or sitting leisurely at the side. But no one stepped forward to help, because no, what kind of poison can turn someone into a kissing maniac? Ha ha ha. I wonder if Long Qingying will remember what she did when she wakes up. This dark history is too annoying, ha ha ha. A metahuman from Ocean City said with a smile. The reaction of this poison should be similar to hallucinogens. It might even have an aphrodisiac effect. Kong Qingming's fingers turned into twigs as he held a bug in his hand and examined it. He walked past Lin Wenwen and the others. Can you come and pick her up? I'm so tired. On my waist." Lin Wenwen pushed away Long Qingying, who was wrapped around him, and turned his face to avoid being kissed by her. In the end, Long Qingying pushed her back more and more, almost crushing her. However, before she could fall, her waist was about to break. At this time, Long Qingying's eyes were not clear, and there was a strange smile on her face. She hugged Lin Wenwen with a wretched look and refused to let go. No matter how hard Lin Wenwen tried, he couldn't pull her hand away. The others just watched from the side, obviously not intending to help. Instead, they all looked at Kong Qingming, and the meaning in their eyes was clear. "Why aren't you up yet? I think if I take her now I'll be fine. When she wakes up, she will definitely cut me with a knife. I don't dare." Kong Qingming put the bug in his hand into a glass container and said with a smile. Among the girls in the team, aside from Lin Wenwen and the other two, there was also a space ability user from Ocean City. However, although she was smiling, she had no intention of going forward to help. "Then quickly think of a way to wake her up." "Sigh, really?" Lin Wenwen said helplessly. She drank the antidote, but there's still no reaction. What else could he do? "We can only bring her back to the base to study the medicinal properties. From the looks of it, she won't be a big threat for the time being," Zhang Xiaonian, who was brought by Kong Qingming, said. Uffed, however, before he could finish, Long Qingying suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, which splashed directly on Lin Wenwen's face. "Ching ching!" Lin Wenwen screamed, and looked at Long Qingying in panic. Then he felt Long Qingying's body go limp. When the others saw this sudden situation, their expressions changed. They all gathered around worriedly. Kong Qingming was the first to quickly flash in front of Lin Wenwen and carry Long Qingying's body. "Let me see." Lung Xiantong immediately went forward to check the eyelids of Long Qingying, who was paralyzed in Lin Wenwen's arms. Although his main profession was not a doctor, as a researcher in the field of viruses, he had dabbled in many medical methods. At least he knew the basic first aid measures. She should have used her ability to force the poison out, but only a little, and some is still in her body. After checking Long Qingying's pupils, Lung Xuantong's expression did not relax. "Then how is her body now?" Lin Wenwen was very worried about Long Qingying's situation. He did not care about the blood on his face, and hurriedly asked. Long Xiantong pondered for a few seconds before saying, I'm not sure about the current situation, but since she has already spat out the poison, her situation should be better than before. Miss Wenwen, quickly wipe the blood off your face with the antidote. Oh, Lin Wenwen responded, stood up, and took out a pack of tissues and antidote. Then, he opened the antidote and poured it on the tissues to wipe the blood off his face. Carry her to the bed in the bedroom first, the other said. The bed in the bedroom was covered with a thick layer of dust. After everyone removed the layer of blankets, there was a layer of mattress underneath. Kong Qingming carefully placed her on the bed. His face was solemn, but with some anxiety, just as he placed her on the bed, before he could let go of her. Long Qingying opened her eyes again. She was dazed for a few seconds before she became clear again. Looking at Kong Qingming's face that was close to her, Long Qingying frowned and asked expressionlessly, What? Once she opened her mouth, she felt that something was wrong. Seeing that she was awake and could even speak, Kong Qingming's face lit up. He immediately stared at her worriedly and asked, How are you? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Seeing that Long Qingying had woken up, the others were delighted. Lin Wenwen, who was half wiping his face, also came over. As he continued to wipe, he moved closer to Long Qingying and asked, Qingqing, do you still recognize me? Do you feel that something is wrong? Long Qingying looked at her wiping her face and was puzzled. Hearing her question, she said briefly, I don't have any strength, my throat is dry, and my body is hot. After saying that, she asked doubtfully, What happened to me? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.